All right, good morning. I'll call the meeting to order. Meeting of the Carver Select Board for Wednesday, December 15th. This meeting is being cablecast by Area 58 Community Access Media, Channel 15, and will be posted by Area 58 on YouTube as soon as possible. There are openings on several committees. Please refer to the Select Board page on our website for a listing and application. If we could all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our community prayer. Almighty God, humbly we pray your blessing as we concern our life with the opportunity to serve our community. Enhance us with your spirit of dignity and selflessness. May we become instruments of support and understanding as we seek to bring an environment of trust and purpose among all who provide the many services that make us all that we can become. Help us achieve the goals of our commitment in this office that is now our responsibility. And especially, we lift our prayers for all the citizens of our community that we have been allowed to serve, that they may discover the fullness and joy of life that we all seek. And keep those serving in our armed forces and our first responders in our hearts and thoughts. Amen. So welcome to everyone joining us on Area 58. We're here today to conduct interviews for interim town administrator candidates. We have a number of candidates joining us during the day. The order of our interviews will be Robert Reed, George Zucchi, Michael Burgess, Michael Sullivan, Thomas Guarino, Carter Terenzini, and Robert Fennessy. We have a number of questions, and what we were going to do today is similar to the last time we did these interviews. We're going to go around the room. Jim will go first, followed by Sarah, myself, Jen, and then Bob. Bob is joining us online today via Zoom. And our first person today is Robert Reed. So, Mr. Reed, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
And I think we should probably get right to this. So, Mr. Hoffman, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Reed, what made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your interest?
Well, I guess I'd go back to why I do interim work in the first place. I retired in September, the month of September, from the town of Leicester. And shortly, oh, is this not working?
Just put it real close.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay. And it was about this time of year, the clocks had changed, it was dark, and I first noticed how long winters are in New England. And about that time, I got a call from a manager who was leaving, got my name from a colleague. Well, Reed just retired, maybe he could fill in as interim. And I met with him in his office, and he was describing the things that needed to be done, the balls that were up in the air, and I, for some strange reason, just felt energized. It was all coming back, and I hadn't even contemplated being an interim. I didn't, I thought I had all those things that I was going to do during retirement, and they got old pretty fast. And as you can see, I've been interim in 5 towns since, all over the winter. I prefer to work over the winter. I've discovered it's important while you're retired to stay connected, to be engaged. And the interim jobs, it's what I do. I found them very rewarding. So when I saw the listing, it looked like a good opportunity. The timing was good. Commute isn't bad. So in a nutshell, that's it. These are the types of jobs that I've been looking for. I think I've been, pretty successful in having these jobs since I retired, and I'm interested in doing it again this winter.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
Thank you for being here, Mr. Reed.
You're welcome.
Why did you want to come to Carver in particular, the town of Carver?
Well, I'm not going to say it's because I'm intimately familiar with Carver. Admittedly, I haven't known a lot about some of the communities that I've been interim in. I just think, as I mentioned before, it's largely, I'll be honest, it's largely the time of year. It's the not a bad commute. Some of turned down because of the length of the commute. I'm sure Carver's a wonderful town. I've driven around a little bit, and the information that I've looked at, it seems to be very well run, very good shape financially, your policies and so forth. But, all indications are that it's a type of town that I'm looking for. But to be honest, I'm not intimately familiar with Carver.
That's okay. Thanks for your answer.
All right. Mr. Reed, thank you once again for joining us this morning. And this question may tag a little bit along with Ms. Hewins, and what do you believe are the major challenges and opportunities facing Carver now and in the future?
Well, I would say that the challenges are similar to the challenges that many other communities are facing. How do you keep the same character? I've driven around town a little bit, and it's a fairly rural community. I'm sure the town isn't as many communities like this are. Want to maintain that character. How do you go about doing that? How do you deal with the pandemic? I mean, I was the interim in Hopedale when the pandemic hit, and I know that just turned everything upside down. And I went from, working how many hours a week I was working to twice as many hours just to get the job done, because all the procedures were changing. So in many different ways, the pandemic is a problem. And also dealing with Proposition 2.5. I've looked a little bit into your finances about how you fund capital, your free cash position, et cetera, and the town looks to be in a very good position, but you don't know how long that's going to last and what the future holds. But I would say, from my standpoint right now, it's similar to the challenges a lot of different communities face.
Thank you very much. Ms. Bogart?
Yeah. What do you think the most important thing that an interim town administrator can do for a town that's in transition?
A couple things, but I'd say the most important thing is to make sure that transition goes as smoothly as possible. There'll probably be a question about my management style. I mean, I'm anticipating that. My management style is very cooperative and open. You don't want somebody who's going to come in here and try and make the town in their own image and cause problems. You don't want problems. You don't want surprises. I think if you were to talk to selectmen that I've worked with, they would tell you that that's my style. I think also I can help with the recruitment to whatever capacity or whatever extent the board finds necessary. I've worked with the different interim communities in helping them with the recruitment. I know there are about 3 main players out there as far as handling recruitment. I've worked with all of them, the Collins Center, Paradigm, MRI. I have my opinions about them as well, but whatever capacity you would want me to work in, I could help you with the transition and make that as expeditious as possible. Also, I think that an interim, if you've been in several communities, can come in with a fresh set of eyes. As I mentioned, I'm sure Carver is very well run, but maybe there would be some things that I would be able to recommend. I've done that in different communities. Why don't you look at this? You can improve that type of thing. Lastly, I would say, and I've said this to boards during the recruitment process, during my interview process, that there's an opportunity with an interim. If there are some difficult issues that need to be addressed, you could look at an interim similarly to a consultant. It's someone who could make the difficult decisions. I mean, the interim will be leaving. He can come in or she and say the things that need to be said, make the, sort of break the ice on some difficult issues that you might have, and that's something that I've done in other communities as well. So there's an opportunity there as well. But I think the main thing is just making sure that no deadlines are missed, no balls that are up in the air get dropped, making sure that the transition is as smooth as possible. And if I decide that I want to continue with this, that someday if they're calling Carver about a reference, you'll just say, hire them.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Belvin?
Hi, thank you very much for coming. What have you done to understand Carver's financial situation and our budgeting process?
I've looked a bit into Department of Revenue reports, DLS, looked at your budget, looked at your budget process. I don't know whether you've set a date for town meeting, but I know that there are certain deadlines that you have as far as submittal of budgets, 75 days before town meeting. From everything I've seen, I think Carver is in a good budgetary position, but as I mentioned earlier, with the state and the pandemic, et cetera, you don't know how long that's going to last. But I think that what I'd say, as far as finding out about the town, and it gets back to the earlier question, this isn't going to help me during the interview, but I think mostly doing a lot of research prior, whether you're looking at newspaper articles or going online, is good for an interview, but I don't know how much it really tells you about the town. I mean, I can spend 15 minutes with Rick and, it's more productive than 2 hours of research at home or meeting with you, which is what I'm going to be doing anyway. So I find that to be a much more useful, much better use of time. It has nothing to do with my interest in the town. I think if you were to talk to selectmen that I've worked with this interim, they'd say I approach the job as if I were the full-time administrator. I mean, I would be dedicated to the community. So that has nothing to do with my interest in the town, but it mostly has to do with just a productive use of time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
What do you feel the role of the select board is in working with the interim town administrator?
I wouldn't see it as any different than the full-time administrator. I think that the communication is essential. Getting back to the earlier question, if there was some things I'd recommend or some changes, I mean, I am not going to be leading charges. I'm not going to be doing anything that doesn't have the board approval or the board isn't fully aware of. You don't want someone coming in and breaking any china. So the communication is important, but I generally speaking, I view it as largely the same as if I were the full-time administrator here.
Thank you.
I don't know if the board feels any different or if you've discussed that, but I'm not sure how much it would really change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hewens?
Thank you. What was the professional accomplishment that you were most proud of and the one that you most regret?
Oh. I think maybe two answers to the first. My first community was Sutton. They had already had a bad experience with it. I got into this profession in the mid-'80s, and I think as anyone will tell you, that's when excuse me, too much coke. That's when people will tell you that the field really exploded. Sorry. A lot of communities were doing good government studies. There was the old incentive aid program, which helped fund these positions, and towns took advantage of that, so it really grew. A lot of communities then obviously were having first-time administrators, which led to a lot of turf battles, and, generally speaking, the shelf life of an administrator in those days was thought to be about 2 years. But I was very gratified after working in Sutton, particularly after they had a difficulty with the previous first-time administrator, that they decided to continue with the position and strengthen it and move on. I mean, I'm concerned about the profession, about municipal management, so that was gratifying that I thought that I helped establish that position in the community. But I'd say the other thing is, when I was in Westport, we got a community development block grant. And I think those grants in general, I'm very happy with. We've done housing rehab programs, ADA studies, et cetera. But we got a grant to do two things: to take bequests to the town and use that for building a senior center from an old school building, and also to put an elevator on the town hall. And these are the kinds of tangible things that you like to be able to point to, that you feel that you've really done something for people after you've left. But what made that unique was that there was a big segment of the community that didn't want a senior center, including the Board of Selectmen. It was a 3-member Board of Selectmen that the power seemed to change with every election. And we went from support to a room full of people against it to support, but we managed to get it done. That was a big learning experience for me, but it was gratifying. The grant administrator was wonderful, and she really helped do that and get it over the finish line. But that was an interesting project to keep moving that forward when there was a lot of opposition.
And the second part of the question, the one that you most regret?
There was another town where I was the first-time administrator, and they had done the good government study, and there was a 3-member board of selectmen, and after 2 elections, a year and a half later, the 2 selectmen that really supported the position and were in favor of this government study were gone. And I had a board of selectmen that really wasn't in favor of the position. 1 member had been a member of the finance committee who now ran for selectman. And the finance committee and the selectmen did not get along at all. So as much as I wanted to get along, I was the emissary of the board of selectmen when I went to FinCom meetings. So there was a tremendous amount of friction that carried over to when this individual was a selectman. But you always look back on those things wondering what you could have done to help. I don't think I could have done anything to help. And I ended up, coming to agreement and leaving, which I thought was a great failure. So I guess that would be it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including emergency management?
Well, I've seen your buildings. It looks like you've got a new fire station, new EMS. I saw the training institute as I was coming in. To be honest, I can't speak greatly to that. I mean, I saw the MRI study on your police department from, 2018? Yes. So I don't know how much has been done to remedy that or to meet the recommendations of MRI. But again, I think that those are some of the things that I would find out and get up to speed when I've had a chance to speak to you and get it from the horse's mouth and hopefully meet with Rick.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Belvin?
All right, how do you handle human resources issues and discipline of employees?
I think the most important thing in a personnel issue and a human resource issue is to try and save the situation. What can you do to help this person and help the town by helping this person that the town is invested in, the person's invested in the community? What are the reasons that the person may not be performing? I mean, if it's a flat-out disciplinary thing, if it's stealing or what have you, then that's pretty cut and dried. But if a person is having difficulty at work, what are the reasons for it? Maybe there's some domestic issues. Maybe they're just in over their heads. Maybe they don't have the resources, the staff, the budget to be able to do what they need to do. And you need to be able to find that out. But, I mean, I believe, first of all, you save the situation, but sometimes it just comes down to a hard choice, and I've made those recommendations, or I've had to follow through with disciplining people, and, hopefully it won't come to the point where they have to be terminated, but, I mean, you have to deal with these situations head on. I think that department heads that I've worked with will tell you that I've worked with them very, very closely. I believe in management by walking around. They're going to see me frequently, depending on the department. I think they'll get the signal that the more I see them, I have some concerns. Some departments, police chiefs come to mind, never see me. I have confidence in them. Chiefs that I've worked with are very professional. And I think that they know I have confidence in them by the fact that I just leave them alone and do their job. And conversely, those departments that see me often are getting the opposite signal. But I think it's important to work with them and see what can be done to help them. And then if they're having an issue with employee, the same thing is true. Whether you need to bring in an EAP, maybe there's some domestic issues. Like I said, maybe they have just had too much dumped on them. Maybe they don't have the resources. But you have to try and get to the root of the problem and try and save the situation if possible. But then it becomes progressive discipline.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
By experience. I mean, I've been interim in a number of communities. I like to think if you check my references, they would have said what I would hope Carver might say one day, which is just hire him. He did a good job while he was here. I think that's basically what it comes down to. I mean, I've enjoyed the positions. Frankly, I think I've been treated a little differently when in the interim positions than I have when I was a full-time administrator, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe they think, well, he's only going to be here for 6 months, so we can deal with him and we can put up with him. But I've had selectmen, department heads say that, we were surprised at how much you took on. Like I said, I approached the position as if it were a full-time position, and if there's something that needs to be done, I'm going to move ahead and do it and give my recommendations to the selectmen. But, I've enjoyed the interim positions. I like to think I've been successful at them, and I believe that I could be a success here as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
How are you going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiative among department heads?
I think it would get back to what I said earlier about being in close contact with department heads. I think that my door is always open. Believe it or not, I've had interim positions where department heads have come to talk to me in my office and have said, we were never able to do this before. It's interesting what kind of situations you can walk into. It's important that people feel valued. It's important that they feel that they're an important part of the organization. And I think that just that open relationship with department heads, where if they see you arrive, they're not saying, oh, what does he want now? But they're saying, well, glad to see you. I was going to come and see you anyway. I've got something to talk to you about. And that relaxed feeling that they can talk to me. So it's important that they be considered valued. Now, they're not always going to get what they want, as you know. They're limited resources. But at least that close contact, they'll understand where they fit in the organization. They'll understand that their concerns are being looked at and are being seriously considered. They may not get what they want, but at least they'll understand why. And I think that's an important part of just overall government. And with any department, they're not going to get everything that they're looking for. But at least if they understand that they were given a fair shake, then that goes a long way. Same with citizens. I also greatly believe in training, sending them out to workshops, training, what have you. There seem to be more and more of those these days. And that's important to help them keep up to speed on their job.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Bogart?
You mentioned in an earlier answer that you thought one of Carver's challenges was keeping rural character. What does rural character mean to you, and then what in your role would you do to help Carver preserve its rural character?
That's a good question. I remember one community, I was in a very wealthy community just outside of Boston, that kept talking about its rural character while all the houses were being torn down and McMansions were being built. And there was one old building in the middle of town that the town was going to great lengths to try and deal with. And the selectmen finally were going to try and take it by eminent domain, even though they really had no idea what they were going to use it for. It was just a stick on the developer. And I remember there was a public meeting about it, and one of the people in town, I guess they weren't in favor of what the selectmen were going to do, said, we keep talking about rural character. That's rural. So what's rural character? I would have to look at the master plan. I would talk to you and the planning board and just find out what the objectives are. But the point of all that was that it can really differ from town to town.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. And I guess finally, what is your expectation and availability for hours of employment, and at what salary, and also when are you available to start?
I'd be available to start whenever you are ready. Hopefully I would have a little overlap with Rick. My schedule has always been to be at the town hall 3 days a week. I don't know if you're looking for somebody to be here 4 or 5 days a week, but I think we're in a time now, I understand there are some town administrators who largely do their job remotely still. I wouldn't be doing that. But the other thing about being here 3 days a week, that's physically here 3 days a week. You would have my cell, I would be on call. Again, if you were to talk to selectmen where I've worked as an interim, despite the fact that I was 3 days a week, those weren't the hours that I was putting in. I remember in particular Hopedale, when COVID hit, I don't know how many hours a week I was working on weekends. You do what needs to be done. As far as the salary, we can discuss that. I just get a daily rate.
All right. And I guess I guess finally, do you have anything else you would like the board to know? Anything else you'd like to mention?
Only that I enjoy the profession. I enjoy being an interim. In all modesty, I think I've been successful at it. I would do my best for Carver. And I would approach the job as interim as if I were your full-time administrator.
Wonderful. Is there anything else from the board?
I have something, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I'm just wondering if you have any particular questions for us, given the type of questions that we asked you.
No?
No.
Those will come later.
Okay. Very good.
All right, Mr. Reed, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in this morning.
Thank you.
And we will be in touch.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, I'd like to ask the board if we could take up the 4:05 agenda item, the approval of the minutes of 12:1 and 12:7 now, since we have a brief period here in between interviews. Would the board be willing to do that now? Issues? Okay. Hearing none. The minutes of 12:1. Is there a motion? That was our tax classification hearing.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of December 1st.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. It is unanimous. All right, the minutes of 12:7. I guess, Mr. Hoffman, I don't believe you were here.
No, I wasn't.
For 12:7. So I'll make a motion that we approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Could I just add one little bit on, I'm not sure the page number, but it's under Town Administrator Update, the update on Eversource response to power outages. I just wanted to add a little more clarification. Bogart clarified that the question was what the town can do to prevent power outages by working with Eversource to make the grid stronger. Because clearly we can't do it ourselves, but it's important that we have conversations and plans with Eversource. So,
All right. I'll amend my motion to include that correction.
I'll second.
Mr. Chair, I have to say, I have to look at the December 7th. For some reason, I neglected to review it.
Okay.
So if we could just postpone that till
Yep.
the next meeting.
Well, why don't we postpone it to later on today?
Okay.
Would you
Yeah,
be
I
willing to
can
do that?
look at it later.
All right, so we'll postpone this till maybe our next brief interlude. And at that, our next interview is scheduled for 11 a.m., so we'll take a brief recess till a couple of minutes before 11. All right. All right, I'll call the meeting back to order. Our next interviewee today is Mr. George Zucchi. Mr. Zucchi, thank you for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
Our format this morning is just to sort of go around the room and ask you some questions, and then at the end we'll give you a chance to mention to us anything that you think the board should know. All right?
Sounds good.
All right. Great. And just so you're aware, one of our members, Mr. Belvin, is also joining us via Zoom. So just so you're aware of that. So I guess I will start off with Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it. What made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your interest?
I having worked and lived in Massachusetts for many years, I know the area reasonably well. In fact, I was just there in mid-October, and I'm looking to go back to New England permanently, and this seemed like a very good opportunity, something that if it's just temporary would allow me to put my mind to work for several months, hopefully, and it seemed like a wonderful opportunity. I know the town of Carver fairly well. I used to deal with it when I was at Mass DOR, and it's a great town, great location, not far from Providence, not far from Boston or the Cape, and I'd love to come back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hewens?
Thank you, Mr. Zucchi. Why do you want to come to Carver in particular?
I think it's a matter of being in the right community and the right location. As I mentioned, you're close to Boston, Providence, and the Cape, and not terribly far from the mountains of New Hampshire, the Berkshires, and I think Carver has kind of a unique location there with the cranberry bogs. As I recall, they're pretty prominent in the area, and I just think it would be a very nice area, sort of combine suburban living with rural living.
Thank you.
And just from the research I've done with your AA credit rating, looks like the town has been well run. It's nice to not, I mean, for lack of a better word, nice to not be taking over a mess, be taking over something that's been well run, and move forward with it, try and make it even better.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I couldn't understand your last comment. I just couldn't understand it. I'm sorry.
I may have my hand over the microphone. Let me make, is this better?
Yes.
I was saying that just from the research I've done, it seems like everything is in great shape, and it would be a matter of taking something over that's in very good shape and making it the same or hopefully better. And that to me is appeal. I've been in a situation where I have to turn around the department. That's certainly something I can do, but it looks, well, all I can tell, it looks like everything's in good shape.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. What do you believe are the major challenges and opportunities facing Carver now and in the future?
I think there's always going to be the financial concerns, keeping the tax rate as low as possible, the constraints of Proposition 2.5, of course, and I think that you're far enough removed from any urban problems that are occurring right now, but I just think the age-old problem of doing more with less is something that would be a challenge.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ms. Bogart.
Mr. Zucchi, your address on your resume is listed as Tennessee, and you said you want to come back to New England. Do you have an established residency in the area, since we're looking for someone very, very soon?
Last night I did look to see what's advertised for furnished temporary housing fees. Of course, my goal would be to buy a place at some point. Luckily I'm in a position where I can do that as soon as I need to. But it looked like there are some temporary furnished options available. I know that's a challenge in certain areas with the economy being in kind of an economic twilight zone, but I think I'd be able to find something temporary without too much trouble, and I could start reasonably quickly.
Okay, and then what do you think the most important thing that an interim town administrator can do for a town in transition?
I think for me would be getting to know the department heads, the staff, the town well very quickly. And luckily I've had to do this before, where you don't have the luxury of a lot of time to really take something over, and I think I could move into it pretty quickly. But to me the biggest thing would be getting to know everybody as quickly as possible, reacquainting myself with Mass Chapter 44, the laws pertaining to municipalities. Luckily, I think it's like riding a bicycle. I think it's all in my head from our work in the past, so it wouldn't take too long to get up to speed on everything very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Baldwin. Bob, are you with us?
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
What have you done to understand Carver's financial or budgetary process? Do you hear me?
Yeah. Area 58, are we having issues with the,
Can you hear me
oh,
now?
there we go. Yeah, we can hear you now, thank you.
Yeah, my phone just asked me to unmute for some reason. I never muted it, but I was saying I researched everything that's available on the town website. I researched the audit and the budget, and it seemed like everything, from what I could tell, is in good shape. And I know you're probably about ready to start the process for the next fiscal year, fiscal 23. And I'm very good with budgeting and working with numbers and money, so it would be a strength that I could bring with me to the community. But having that AA credit rating, it tells me that the town is well, because that's reflection on the finances, the demographics, and the management. So that's a good report card to get.
All right, thank you. Bob, were you trying to say something?
No?
Oh, okay. Mr. Hoffman?
What do you feel the role of the select board is with working with the interim town administrator?
Of course, the interim town administrator is there to fulfill the wishes and requirements of the select board. So I think I have to have a close relationship. I've worked with governing boards in several of my positions, both in Boston a bit, and New Hampshire quite a bit, in New York and California, so I'm used to working with governing boards. Of course, I'm there to give my opinions and act on what the board would like. So I see it needs to be a very good relationship.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Jones?
Thank you. What was the professional accomplishment that you are most proud of? And what is the one that you most regret?
Well, most proud, there'd be a couple, but one that comes to mind when I was treasurer of New York City's Municipal Water Finance Authority, the agency had 3 AA ratings, but really with the finances the way they were, they should have been AAA. And the main reason that the rating agency didn't upgrade was that the water authority had a pretty abominable collection rate of about 80%. Which meant that 80% of the customers were subsidizing 100%. And I was told that the New York City Council would not allow any customers to be cut off, but I worked sort of behind the scenes on a compromise, and the council passed it where we were allowed to cut off commercial and industrial customers and place liens on the properties of residential customers. And that almost overnight increased the collection rate to 90%, and 2 of the 3 rating agencies upgraded the authority to AAA at that point. So that was an accomplishment I was proud of. I mean, similarly with the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, when I started in 1993, the agency had 2 single A ratings, and when I left, we had 2 AA and 1 AAA rating. We were the only AAA in New Hampshire, and one of only 2 in the northern New England states at the time. So those are accomplishments I'm very proud of.
And what is the one thing in your professional career that you most regret?
I think there's not one problem I could really point to. I've had a pretty successful run of things, but I would say that there were a couple of times where I may have left after a couple of years where I probably should have stayed longer to really see through everything I wanted. But unfortunately, when I was younger, there was always the little greener pastures, and I'm sort of at a different stage in life now.
Thank you.
So no one flop or failure, but I just think I should have had a little more patience in my youth.
Thank you.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including the emergency management department?
I don't really have any strong thoughts yet. I didn't really do enough analysis on the departments individually other than just looking at budgetary numbers. And so I don't think I can really give a good answer on that. That seems, from what I could tell, I didn't see any problems. But as I mentioned before, you're always trying to do more with less, so it would just be a matter of, I know that retention and recruitment are a challenge right now, so it's something I would probably work with the chief to see if we can make those numbers work to retain and recruit.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Belbin?
Yes. How do you handle human resources and discipline of employees?
I've overseen human resources in California and in New Hampshire. We were a small office, so that was one of the many hats I wore, and I don't have any problems with that. I've been lucky. I've only had a handful of problem employees. One was a frequent no-show, and the other one would drink her lunch. And I was able to deal with both of those successfully. One was drinking her lunch, was a 40-plus year employee who was not quite ready to retire yet. And I worked with her to eliminate the problem. Luckily, she took late lunches, but the days she drank, she was absolutely useless, and in fact, kind of a hostile drunk after around 2 o'clock. And luckily, I got her back on track, and she worked hard right up until the day she retired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
I think my best answer to that is I'm uniquely qualified, and that I've had a very kind of diverse career. I've worked with smaller communities. I've worked with Boston, New York, and suburban Los Angeles. And I've worked in Washington, D.C., so I kind of bring to the table a very diverse knowledge, both working with small communities. I mean, I spent the bulk of my career, 5 years with Mass Division of Local Services, and over 12 and a quarter years with the New Hampshire Bond Bank. So I've worked with communities exactly the size of Carver quite a bit. In fact, at Local Services, I can't remember the name of the gentleman who was treasurer at the time, but I worked with Carver on financing, capital planning issues back in a long time ago. So I think I bring to the table a diverse knowledge, a good financial background, plus a good administrative background. I've had 2 offices where I had large staffs reporting to me. In California, I had over 30. In Washington, D.C., it was over 60. So I think I bring both the financial and the administrative background. That helps too.
Thank you.
Ms. Ewens?
Thank you. How are you going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiative among department heads?
Well, as I mentioned, talking about public safety, I mean, right now I understand that recruitment and retention can be a challenge for many communities. And my opinion has always been to create a hardworking yet pleasant work environment, one that people like to show up in the morning and do what they have to do. And I want everything done accurately and on time, and I really believe in setting realistic goals and deadlines, but they have to be met. So I would do my best to. I think I'm a good person to work for, and I've had not a ton of turnover over the years under me, so I think that's a good endorsement. And I would do my best to create a positive working environment and hope to retain and recruit employees as needed.
Thank you.
Mr. Zucchi, what does rural character mean to you, and what would you do in your role to preserve rural character in Carver?
There was plenty of rural character when I lived and worked in New Hampshire, certainly, and at Mass Division of Local Services. So to retain that character, I think it's good to have proper zoning and attract the right type of jobs to the community. I realize a community like Carver will end up being a bit of a bedroom for larger communities nearby, but just to retain through good zoning and good planning, a community that retains its character, that people want to live there. That in fact is very important to me. I see a town administrator, part of the role is of course administrative and managerial, but part of it is being a cheerleader for the community, for lack of a better word. And that's something I would enjoy doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess finally, what is your expectation and availability for hours of employment and at what salary? And also, when are you available to start?
I could probably start, I was looking at the calendar, I mean, today's the 15th, I could probably start as early as the Monday, the 27th, I would think, or for the first Monday of the new year. I think that's the 3rd, so I could probably start either one. If I knew this was going to happen, I'd get up there and find the temporary housing, make sure I had that secured. And my availability, this would be with my sole duty, so I'd be available basically day and night, 7 days a week. I think that's an important role of a town manager or administrator. So I think I could start within 2 to 3 weeks without any difficulty. And of course, any help that the select board could with housing would be appreciated. But like I said, I looked last night, if you go within half an hour radius, there seems to be options. And if it's a matter of buying a house, there were options right in town.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to tell us? Anything else you'd like the board to know?
The two things I didn't really hit on salary. I think what you pay for a permanent one seems to be in the correct range. So I'm sure we could come to an agreement. And one thing I'd like to bring up, in fact, one of my references is contact is one in Washington D.C. Can speak more to this, but when I took over at the U.S. Department of Transportation's Maritime Administration, there'd been nobody full-time in that role. I was an associate administrator, one of the top career people in the office, and there'd been nobody full-time in that role for over 2 years. The lady had retired from the job, and the man they hired left after about 3 weeks. I think he wasn't for him, and the position sat vacant for 2 years. So when I started, I not only had to get to know the industry, because I didn't really know much about maritime at that point, but I had to get to know the staff and sort of bring them back into professional management, and it worked pretty well. I was lucky I started around the holidays, around Thanksgiving, Christmas, so it was a relatively calm time of the year in the office, and within 2 months I pretty much had everything back up and running, and I had 5 very different offices under me. Everybody except one was under one roof. I had one staff member in New York City, the rest in D.C., and I really got up and running pretty quickly. I think I exceeded my expectations and brought back morale and productivity into the cross-training, which didn't exist, and that was kind of a crazy idea that there was no cross-training, and I got that introduced right away. So, and my improvements paid off pretty quickly. One lady had a heart attack, and if we hadn't done cross-training, nobody would have known what she did. And I wanted to mention that to the board as well, so that you understand I'm capable of taking over something and getting up to speed very quickly.
Is there anything else from any members of the board?
I have something.
Ms. Ewens.
Mr. Zucchi, I'm just wondering if you have any questions for us, given the particular questions that we had for you.
I think the only question I would have is what's your process, and how I would assume you would make a decision pretty quickly. When would you like a person to start? Sort of issues like that.
Well, our current town administrator's contract ends December 31st, so we're looking to someone to start, pretty soon, around the first of the year. And we have another meeting scheduled tomorrow. We'll be making a decision relatively soon on which way we want to go. So
that would be the only thing for me is housing, temporary housing to get me through the beginning month or two. How long an assignment are you planning? How long do you think it would take to do a recruitment for a permanent administrator?
I would think we're looking for an interim for approximately 6 months.
Oh, that's fine. One question I should ask: is the interim person allowed to apply for the permanent role as well?
They are. Yes.
Okay, that's good. That's good, because if selected, I would likely apply for the permanent role as well.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Ewens.
So the process of selecting the permanent one starts off being confidential. So we won't know who's applying for the permanent one until almost at the very end.
Right.
We have a screening committee that's set up to interview candidates for the permanent position. So you could certainly apply to that screening committee if you wanted to. But
I see that sounds good, sounds fair enough, and I think at least at that point there'd be a several-month track record, so that would certainly help.
all right. Anything else from the board? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Zucchi. We will be in touch. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right. We will be in recess until our next interview, coming back at approximately noontime. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. And I just, prior to our next interviewee, Mr. Michael Burgess, I just want to announce an updated interview schedule for this afternoon. Michael Sullivan has moved from 1 to 12:30. Thomas Guarino has moved from 2 to, Michael Sullivan has moved from 1 to 12:30. Thomas Guarino has moved from 2 to 1:30. Carter Terenzini has moved from 3 to 2:15. And Robert Fennessy has moved from 4 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So that is our updated interview schedule for this afternoon. And with that, I would welcome Michael Burgess to the meeting. Welcome, Mr. Burgess.
Hello, thank you.
Can you hear us okay? Everything's okay?
Just fine.
All right. And Mr. Belbin, you're still there with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, wonderful. Mr. Burgess, just so you know, we do have one member joining us remotely via Zoom.
Yes, I see him.
All right, great. So with that, what we're doing this afternoon is sort of going around the room here, asking some questions, and then at the end, we'll give you an opportunity to tell us whatever there is you think we may have missed or you'd like us to know. All right? So with that, we will start with Selectman Jim Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. What made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your interest?
I applied for several city manager positions around that area of the Northeast because I love that area. City manager because I think it's something I'm qualified to do.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Ewens?
Could you tell us why you want to come to Carver, the town of Carver in particular?
Well, I want to come to a smaller town, so that's a part of it. I've lived and worked in big cities, and I'm really more of a smaller town kind of guy. So at this point in my life, I want to go to a smaller town. I wanted it to be around that area, and Carver seemed like a nice fit.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. What do you believe are the major challenges and opportunities facing Carver now and in the future?
Well, that's a big question. I'm afraid that probably any one of you could answer that question more adroitly than I could. I will say that for the size of the town, so development and creation of high-value jobs is probably number one in my mind for a town that size. Obviously, dealing with the sorts of issues that a town that size will have, from being able to properly deal with everything from how house building is done to how the downtown area is revitalized, are also priorities. There will be peculiarities to Carver that, again, any one of you would be probably more qualified to answer than me.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart?
Yeah, your address was not on your resume, and I was wondering if you have an established residency in the area.
No, actually address was not on my resume. That surprises me.
Well, at least not on the copy I have.
Oh, okay, well, probably it's on the cover letter, and maybe the cover letter wasn't sent in this case. I'm not sure. My address right now, and for the last time since I came back to the States, has been Bandon, Oregon, on the coast. I came here because I actually came back to the States from Europe because both of my folks are really getting along in age, and I wanted to come back and help until my sister moved in with them, and that's already happened. And so now I'm trying to get back to an area of the country that I prefer to be in because I'm not a two seasons kind of guy.
So do you have a residency in the area since we're looking for someone quite soon?
I'm more than prepared to go there. So
Okay.
I'm willing to relocate. So no, I don't live there right now.
Okay, and then a separate question is, what do you think the most important thing that an interim town administrator can bring to a town that's in transition?
Well, a town that's in transition always has a lot of cards on the table, a lot of things that need to be dealt with, and when you don't have a town administrator taking care of that, I assume you have a lot of other people picking up the slack. So taking that extra work off the people that have taken it in the meantime, while there was no town administrator, and getting that back into the town administrator position, and getting everything properly taken care of and organized and ready for the permanent town administrator would be the most important tasks, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Belvin?
Yes, thank you, sir. What have you done to understand Carver's financial and budgetary process?
Absolutely nothing. So I don't want to pretend like I've done anything to this point to understand your budgetary process. I am a quick learner. I do understand financial controls and management. If I am able to sit down with whoever's been doing it until now, I will be able to understand the situation within a few hours.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Hoffman?
What do you feel the role of the select board is in working with the interim town administrator?
Well, I think the role of the select board is probably greater when dealing with an interim town administrator than with a permanent one. Making sure that everything is occurring in the way that it needs to be occurring, because the select board's going to know a lot better than anybody, and there's probably members of the select board that have picked up some of that slack that I was talking about in the earlier question, and they're going to be working a little bit more directly with the interim town administrator and just making sure everything's on track. That's what the select board does, as I understand it.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones?
Thank you. What was the professional accomplishment that you're most proud of? And what is the professional situation, shall I say, that you most regret?
Professional situation that I most regret?
And the one you're most proud of, accomplishment, professional accomplishment.
I really don't have any professional regrets. I'll try to think about that while I'm answering the other side of the question. The professional accomplishment that I'm most proud of, well, honestly, there was a number of them. I think doing 2 complete historical buildings from top to bottom in downtown Budapest near the Danube and in an area of aggressive groundwater, going 3 levels underground, and protecting those buildings in the way that we did, including taking down part of the building with the 2 teams of people by hand and rebuilding it into a fine, beautiful building like it was originally. I'm very proud of those 2 buildings. But honestly, the light industrial park work that I began my career with, the first industrial park that I worked on, it was a former Soviet military base right by the main highway about 60 clicks south of Budapest, 550 acres. We turned that into one of the most successful industrial parks in Eastern Europe and in Europe as a whole. We created over 8,000 jobs in 4 years. I'm pretty proud of that. I like creating jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including our emergency management department?
What are my thoughts on it?
Yes.
I'm not a type of person that makes stuff up. I don't know much about what's going on with your EMT department. If I analyzed it from top to bottom, which I would be capable of doing in a short time, I could give you an opinion that would be worth something to you. As it is, just guessing, I don't see how that helps me or you.
Okay.
I don't know anything about what's going on with your EMT.
All right. Okay, Mr. Belvin.
Hi. How do you handle human resources and discipline of employees?
I don't like to lose employees, so I like to work with people and come up with every possible solution to keep that employee if it's possible. So how do I deal with discipline of employees? If it's necessary, there are no doubt procedures in place for that. What I prefer to do is to work with those employees, find out why they're not completing the tasks in the way that they should be done, because assumedly that's the cause of the problem, and work with them and additional training, additional coaching, whatever's necessary to try to keep them. If nothing works and the employee has to be let go, then that'll be done in accordance with the procedures of the town.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
I had a career where I constantly switched from project to project. Projects usually lasted from 1 to 3 years. Sometimes I had more than one going at the same time, but I tried to focus on one at a time because they were usually quite large. The smallest being around $10 million, the largest around 80. So, yeah. Can you rephrase the question, maybe?
Yeah, so what in your past? What in your past work experience makes you feel? So in other words, what have you done for your qualifications?
So, sorry, what I wanted to get at initially when I started that long answer was, so as a part of these projects, each individual project was like starting a completely new business. Employees had to be hired, all the different things had to be done. Architects, engineers, general contractor, lawyers, accountants, and then of course the employees necessary for the project. That requires the development of an ability to land on your feet and get things going and get things done well. Most of the projects were for multinational corporations, mostly American, few German. And so they had very high requirements. And to hit the ground running on a project that's got 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different ethnicities and languages going at the same time, and get all those people organized and get things going in such a way where you're on or under budget and on or under the timeline is a great challenge. And to be able to do that over and over and over, an ability evolves in that person to be able to hit the ground running. And from that point of view, I'm sure there's no one that can hit the ground running the way that I can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hewins.
Yes, how are you going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiatives among department heads?
Always thought of myself as a team builder, a relationship builder, and I think that quality is very important in making people feel comfortable with you and with what you're doing and with whatever it is that's on the table. And I think that quality is the most important one, to make people feel a part of things, and making them feel a part of things is a part of this sort of camaraderie that can be easily established that I think leads to an overall positive result.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Bogart?
What does rural character mean to you, and what would you do in your role to preserve the rural character of Carver?
Rural character to me means the beauty of the farms and the forests and the overall rural area. If we're talking about around a city, then around a city. Rural character is very important to me. Assuming the town of Carver has all of the procedures in place to enforce its regulations, and there isn't any problem with how those regulations can be enforced. To preserve rural character, you need to enforce the regulations in place, and you also need to adopt new regulations, as it seems the present ones are not working enough or not working well to preserve that rural character in the opinion of the select board.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I guess finally, what is your expectation and availability for hours of employment, and when are you available to start?
My expectation for hours of employment is very simple. What's needed. So in this sort of an interim position, and with everything that I did in my career until now, you have to be willing to do what's necessary to get the job done. And I'm assuming it's going to take some extra hours, certainly in the beginning. In the availability part of the question, I'll make myself available when needed, depending on the wishes of the select board.
But I guess the question is, we have a current town administrator whose contract ends on December 31st. So I guess what is the soonest you would be available to start? Let me put it that way.
If you need me to be there by January 1st, I don't see why that's impossible.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like the board to know? Anything else you'd like to tell us?
I know that you're going to look at people that have already done the town administrator job and or are presently doing it. I understand that to you, that's got to look more attractive than someone like me who has no experience as a city manager. I would urge you to consider that I am an expert at development. If your town is in need of any development, it's doubtful that you're going to be able to get another town administrator that understands it the way that I do. I guess that would be my only comment.
All right. Is there anything else from the board? Ms. Ewing?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr. Burgess, what do you know about Mass General law, and in particular about our procurement law?
Well, so one more time, I'll say I'm just not good at saying things that are not exact. What do I know exactly about Massachusetts law at this moment? Absolutely nothing. I did go to law school. I do understand the general laws that connect us all here in the United States, including procurement, which I spent a year helping University of Oregon with, but that doesn't make me any kind of an expert on what's going on in procurement in Massachusetts. I would add that as a lawyer and as someone who's done what I've done, I can read up on any law and have a good understanding of it within an hour or two. So if it's about how quickly I can catch up on what's going on in Massachusetts procurement law, that's one thing. If it's how much experience do I have with Massachusetts law or Massachusetts procurement law, wow, try those words together really quickly. The answer is right now, I know absolutely no more than anyone else.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, Mr. Burgess, we appreciate you joining us this afternoon.
I appreciate it.
We will be meeting soon to consider applicants, and we'll be in touch.
Thank
All
you
right.
for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
All right, we will be in brief recess until our next interview at approximately 12:30. All right, we are back in session, and we will take up the minutes of 12/7/21. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. I just have a few amendments, and I apologize to Mrs. Weston for this because I just read it a few minutes ago. So on page 1, we need to know who made the motion to approve the appointment to the Recreation Committee. It's just not listed. I don't know who made that motion. It's at the bottom of the page. And then,
Mr. Belvin, am I correct? I think you made that motion. I'm trying to
Yeah,
go.
I made the motion.
okay. And then on page 2, the section listed a new section at the beginning, colon. Down at the bottom of that where it says Townsend does not want to see this board bind future boards. We need to insert that Hewens agreed with Townsend that she does not want to bind future boards to a time limitation for an ITA.
I'm sorry, Sarah, I don't see, where are you?
I'm on page 3,
Okay, oh, sorry, that was on the wrong page.
the first section that says a new section at the beginning.
I see it. Sorry, thank you, I was on the wrong page.
That's okay.
Okay.
And then under the part that's headed section 3.3.1.1, it begins, Hewens would like a few changes. Down at the end of the sentence where it says a member of the Finance Committee be included as they have a lot of interaction. I think I said that they have the most interaction with the TA in the finances of the town of any other board other than the Select Board. Let me know when you're ready. Okay. So at the bottom of that page 3, where it says a new section at the end, where I said that this does not agree with this as it reverts the town back to the early 90s when the Select Board ran things, and it was about politics, favors, and who you knew. I actually believe I said it was about politics, backroom deals, favors, and who you knew. On page 4, and Mr. Townsend, you correct me if I'm wrong, but the very first sentence where it says you stated that the reason the town went with the process, I think you said you went with the TA position,
I think so.
is to remove politics.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. And then a little bit down on the page where it says Hewens stated this is a dangerous slope. Just prior to that, I actually asked Mr. Belbin who defines the word conflict, and I asked if that would be Mr. Belbin defining that word. That's okay. And then on page 5, under the section titled Scenic Roads, that I read from the general laws, Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15C, where it says this was done in the last open space and recreation plan. That should read, scenic roads were established in the last open space and recreation plan, and that plan was accepted by the state. And the next sentence, the public hearing was overlooked, should read, the public hearing that should be held by the planning board and the tree warden was overlooked. Towards the middle of the page, interim TA comments on his 18-month tenure. Where it said his accomplishments over the last 18 months and the many years he served. I believe that Town administrator said very plainly it was 17 years that he served Carver.
Yeah.
Just a couple more, folks. Okay, top of page 6, first sentence. Ewan stated she would never tell another board or commission, etc. I actually said I would never dream of telling another board or commission what to do, etc. And the very last one, and Mrs. Bogart, you can object if I got this wrong, but where you, under community announcements on page 7, you were pleased with the holiday lights and thanked everyone. Doing so, you also said this is what the world needs now.
I'm sure I did.
All right.
Thank you, that's all.
I will amend my previous motion to incorporate Ms. Ewan's corrections.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And you're abstaining, correct?
Correct. Abstain.
All right. All right. We will now be in recess until our next interview at approximately 12:30. All right, I will call the meeting back to order. Our next interviewee today is Mr. Michael Sullivan. And Mr. Sullivan, just so you're aware, what we're doing today is sort of going around the room with some questions from the board, and then at the end you'll have an opportunity to give us any thoughts that we may not have heard or tell us anything you'd like us to know.
Sure.
Okay? All right, so we'll start with Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. What made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your interest?
I retired officially in December of 2019. I was brought back because my successor wasn't picked during the pandemic. So I worked through May of 2021. I played quite a bit of golf this summer, and now I'm bored. That's as blunt as I can be. I've always wanted to do town administrative work. I always wanted to be a town manager. If I wasn't going to be mayor of Newburyport, because I had been the city clerk there, and I had done high-level administrative stuff. I mean, I ran a state agency. And I miss the action, and this is something I've always wanted to do. I know what happens at the local level. I know what happens at the state level. I have good contacts at both levels to talk to people. There's something to be said about being a good communicator and a good listener, and I think this is that kind of job that works very well in that regard.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Hewins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sullivan, why do you want to come to Carver in particular?
It's what's available. And frankly, I like it down here. I have friends who live in the Pine Hills. It's close to the Cape. It's something different, completely different from what I've done in terms of geography. Everything I've ever done is either Boston North. And I think it'd be very interesting to come down here.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Sullivan, again, thank you for joining us, and thank you for accommodating our schedule today.
Not a problem.
What do you believe are the major challenges and opportunities facing Carver, both now and in the future?
The major opportunities. Well, trying to understand from what little research I was able to do, because I was blocked out of a lot of paywalls on newspaper stories. But there appears to be a battery facility that's going to go in on Route 44. I think that you've got that Route 44 area that you probably need to work pretty closely with the state on what's going on. You appear to have quite a bit of land, so your planning board and your zoning board need to work together with the select board to understand what you want to do as far as growth goes, because you're going to be a growth community. You've got 11,000 people. Plymouth has grown exponentially. It's a huge landmass. People are going to start looking at other places, and I think you're going to have to decide what you want to do for the future. I think those are two very important issues, because it's going to impact your school department. And the example I'll give you is when I was living in Newburyport, they took a cornfield, and they said, oh, we're going to market this to over 55 people. And I was like, so it won't be a drain on city services. It won't really be a cost. Well, yeah, you're going to market it to over 55, and you're going to get planning board approval for over 55. But let's be honest, kids are going to move in there, and there's going to be a school cost for each child. It's going to be an incremental cost, or whatever it costs at the time to educate a child in Newburyport. Don't miss the entire picture. Know what's really going to happen. Have it thought through clearly, because you're going to have growth. Everyone has growth, but here especially. Get a good climate down here. It's better than it is up north where I live in Danvers now, and when I lived in Newburyport. It's warmer down here. The access to the Cape. I think you're going to have that kind of growth, and you need to be careful about it.
Okay. And just as a point of clarification for the folks at home, I think you might have commingled a couple of different developments. We have a major commercial development going in North Carver by the intersection of Route 58 and Route 44. The battery storage area is located a little bit farther
Okay.
south along or off Route 58. So just as a point of clarification for the folks at home that might be watching this. Ms. Bogart.
What do you think the most important thing an interim town administrator can do for a town that's in transition?
So I thought about this, and I actually have a corollary, and it's a sports corollary. A lot of college football coaches have left in the last 3-4 weeks, including two of my favorite schools, Notre Dame, where one of my sons went, and LSU, where the coach went to. And I sort of think of it as the interim coach. The interim coach is going to come in, and there's a program in place, and there are people in place, and there are players in place, and there are staff in place. And the interim person's job is not to blow this up, or not to make these huge, major changes in lifestyle. It's to get them to the next level and to make sure that everybody communicates. And one of the things I always did as a state agency head, once a week, 9:30, for 1 hour staff meeting. I had 17 people in the office, and we would go around the table, and everybody would have their minute, 2 minutes, whatever was on their mind, whatever their issue was. What's up with you? What do we got going? And that way, everyone's able to communicate. Right now, I'm going to guess that there's a lot of people in town who work for the town who are worried about what's going to happen. You know, how do I fit into that scheme? And so the first thing you've got to be able to do is listen and communicate. So I think if you do those two things and you keep things, without making major changes, we're not building new highway off-ramps here. We're going to try to just keep this place, going and moving forward.
Yeah.
And that's what the goal is. And be able to hand it off to the permanent town administrator in a way that makes that person feel good about what's been going on here. I think that's the most important thing. And I do think that there's a corollary between the interim football coach and the interim town manager.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Belvin.
Thank you for coming, sir. What have you done to understand Carver's financial and budgetary process?
Well, I do know the local budget process pretty well. Today I took a quick look at, you have a split tax rate, which I found very interesting. It's at 145%. A lot of towns don't do that. Where I lived, we had a single tax rate in Newburyport, but we had a split tax rate in Lynn. So I've looked at your budget. I saw it's about $44 million. I don't think there's a need to reinvent the wheel. As much as everyone wants to talk about zero-based budgeting and starting from zero, I don't know if that's the panacea that everyone thinks it is. I think you take a good hard look at everything, and you talk to each department head. It's local budgeting. I did it when I was a city clerk, albeit a while ago. I probably didn't have gray hair back then. But I've done it. I've done it at the state level. I've dealt with, the House Ways and Means folks, the Senate Ways and Means folks, the administration folks. I know how to do a budget. I know how to talk to people, understand what's going on. I know where the fluff is. I know that everyone's going to eventually complain about the fact that, about the concept that the school department has too many administrative salaries, and we need to have less administrators and more people in and more teachers in the classroom. That's a constant, no matter what community you go to. I watched a little bit of one of your select board meetings. I watched about an hour. And there was a concept there that this was a unique town. And I'm sure it is, because every town is unique. But every town has some of the same problems and some of the same issues. And putting a budget together is something that happens in every single town. And I think I can do that pretty well. I know where the dollars are, and I know how to find them and make them be used efficiently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
What do you feel the role of the select board is in working with the interim town administrator?
I think it's a great question, and I think it's a role where we need to be able to talk and be honest with each other. But the interim town administrator has to understand that the policy direction comes from the board. And the interim town administrator's job is to carry out that policy direction. And if there's misunderstandings about that direction, then there needs to be able to be a conversation before things get messed up, for lack of a better word. So, you know, everybody wants things to happen like that, but you got to understand that everything's got to be put in place and everybody's on the same page. So, you know, if one select person comes to you and says, this is what we need to do, well, do you have 2 other votes? Because the first thing I taught everybody as a city councilor when they would come in, when I was in Newburyport, was, can you count to 6? Because there were 11 councilors. If you can't count to 6, then we can't do this. We can't pass it, we can't implement it, it isn't going to work. So there has to be a consensus of the board what the policy is, and the interim town administrator's job is to implement it. And I'll give you another sports analogy, okay? And I hope I don't go overboard with these, but pass interference. In high school, pass interference is not an automatic first down, but it is a 15-yard penalty. In college, pass interference is a spot foul unless it's more than 15 yards, and then it's 15 yards. And in pros, it's a spot foul. Now, I'd love to work in the NFL. I have a good friend who does work in the NFL. Doesn't mean that if I went to the NFL, I would change the way the rules are, right? I may not like the rule. I may not like the spot foul pass interference rule, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to administer it and enforce it. Same thing here. If the policy direction comes from the board and that's what they want to do, then that's what we're going to do. I think that's as fair as I can be on that.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hewins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick point of clarification. Actually, we are building a new highway off-ramp up in North Carver. My question is, what was the professional accomplishment that you're most proud of and the one that you most regret?
The one I'm most proud of is the fact that we've changed the entire disclosure and reporting system for every candidate who runs at the state level. There used to be a system. For several years, I went to members of the legislature and I tried to get them to change the way they did their campaign reports. You all do campaign reports, you all do them by yourself. Right? The bank doesn't do them for you. For part of our candidate program, the banks did do it, and the banks report once a month. Actually, then it was twice a month. I went to the legislature, specifically Speaker Mariano, before he was Speaker, and I said, listen, we have many people here whose bank balance do not reflect what their campaign account says that they have. And I know you're one of them. You know, after you've been there so long, mistakes are made. Your checkbook is not perfect. So we were able to implement a law that everybody who runs has their activity disclosed through the bank, and once a month. So everybody knows that what is reported is accurate. Now, was that hard to do? Yeah, we had probably 700 candidates, and then we expanded that to anyone who runs for city council or mayor in a city over 65,000. So it was a lot of work. We reached out individually to every single candidate, email, phone, personal visits, go to every single town. So that was something I'm very proud of, the fact that we've got that done. We've got that done right. Regret. Personnel issue.
Excuse me?
A personnel issue is my biggest regret. I don't want to get into specifics, but a person had an addiction issue, and I gave him too much rope. I grew up in a family with an addiction issue. I understood how it hurt people. My biggest regret is I waited too long, and it affected my staff. I was more worried about that one individual than I was the staff, and there was just too much rope. That's my biggest regret. If I could do that over again, as much as I wanted to be compassionate, I probably would have made the decision to let that person go sooner. Because I had that, as director at OCPF, you have a lot of leeway. It's an independent state agency. So, everyone, they used to laugh and tell me that they served at the pleasure of the director, which I thought was kind of a funny line. And I should have done that earlier. I think that's probably my biggest regret.
Thank you.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including the emergency management department?
I was surprised that you had a separate EMS department. You don't see that very often. When I pulled in and I was like, wow, they have a separate EMS. I wonder if that's financially feasible. I wonder if that makes sense as opposed to.
It's
Yeah, they're
self-sustaining.
self-supporting.
It's self-sustaining, is it really? Yeah, you don't see that up north very much. We didn't have it in Newburyport, we didn't have it in Lynn, although I think they might have gone to it recently. I noticed driving down here, and this is a little off topic, but I noticed the new school. So I know that people here, and I know you did it through a 2.5 override, because I was here and I did a seminar about how to go about getting the vote done. And I was in an old elementary school with a
Yes,
very
you were.
small gym.
Yeah, that's right, that's where the new elementary school are, right
Is that where it is?
adjacent to it.
Yeah. I just, that was a while ago. But I remember liking the gym because it had kind of like, the stands went up like that, but that's off topic. I honestly don't know much about your police fire issues.
Okay.
I'll be very blunt about that. I couldn't find anything I went through some minutes and I looked around, but I don't know much about that.
That's
I
fine.
guess you could say I would come in with a clean slate on that issue.
And that's fine. Mr. Belvin?
Yes, sir. What have you done to understand Carver's financial and budgetary process?
Well, I thought we covered a little bit of that, but
Bob, I think that's,
I'm sorry.
I think you missed
I'm
your
on
question.
number 2, sorry.
That's all right.
it's okay.
How do you handle human resources and discipline employees?
Well, we covered that a little bit,
I know.
but honestly, I'm not going to say that I'm the most lenient person around, but I had 2 rules in my office. One is you must work and play well with others, because I don't have time for your baloney. That's putting it nicely, I guess. And the second was if you leak to the newspaper, you leave, because everything we did was subject to grand jury secrecy. So in 25 years as running OCPF, we never had one leak, even though a woman who now writes for the New York Times told me when she worked for the Globe that I was leaking to the Herald, and when she worked for the Herald that I was leaking to the Globe. So she had covered all her bases. But in terms of human resources, if your employees are working with you and through the system, and they believe in you, and they believe that you're listening to them, and they're not being ignored, that's pretty important. That's working as a crew. That's working together. And, I've been a sports official for 35 years. There's nothing more important than working as a crew and understanding what your crew needs to do, because you have to trust each other. Trust is paramount. And so from a human resources aspect of it, I want to understand what's going on with people. I want to listen to their problems and see if there are problems, how do we fix them? And don't always just come to me with a problem. Come to me with a solution to the problem. It may not be the solution we choose, but don't just come to me and complain about a problem. Come to me with a solution to the problem that you're seeing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman?
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
I understand local government. I understand state government. I have good contacts at both levels. All politics is really local. I know that's a trite statement, but everything really is local. Everything starts at the local level, and I enjoy that. I was at the state level for a long time, but there was part of me that was always looking back to wanting to do stuff at the local level. And that's why the town, that's the only thing I've applied for is a couple of town administrative jobs. Other than one in New York, but that's another story for another day. I like the local level. It's where it happens. It's where the rubber hits the road. It's where the money starts. It's where people have complaints. They want to be able to talk to somebody. I mean, your phones probably ring off the hook, or your emails probably come in with a complaint about this, or there's trash here, or they didn't pick up that, or whatever the case might be. That I like solving problems. Let's solve the problem, and that's what you're going to get. Early in my career, I did property management. I called that headache management. It's a little bit like this as well, but it's a mix. There's headache management, and then there's the ability to do things moving forward for the town. I like that idea.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
Thank you. How are you going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiative among department heads?
I think it starts with that staff meeting. If they see that I've bought in, that the town administrator has bought in, then they're going to buy in because they're going to feel valued. And that's how you start the communication level. You know, we don't always have to be on the same team, but once the decision is made, we're all on the same team. And I think that's important. I do think, and your larger departments, police, fire, DPW, I'm not going to get to know every single one of those folks, but I'm going to know the leadership hierarchy. It would be hard in a 3 to 6 month period to get to know every single person in those areas. But if they believe from their leadership that they're being heard at town hall, that their opinions mean something, I think that's really important. I mean, communication's key. In relationships and communication, no matter what you're doing, where you're doing it, or how you're doing it, if you don't have those things, it's not going to work.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart?
A little bit ago, you said that growth in Carver is kind of inevitable.
I think so, yeah.
What does rural character mean to you, and what would you do in your role to preserve Carver's rural character?
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure that the people who live here want to preserve the rural character. I think I would assume that's true, but that's where it starts. It starts at the ground level, at the grassroots level. I think that if you're going to look at that in growth, then you need to make sure that your zoning bylaw is what it needs to be, because you're going to have people who want to come in here and do Chapter 40B. And they're going to want to put a development in that everyone's going to think is too dense for not everyone, but some people are going to think it's too dense for the property. And then they're going to worry about, who's going to live there? And who are these outsiders? Well, you've got to be able to make sure that you balance the scales. You've got statutes, you've got a zoning bylaw that I don't know when it was last updated. I know that we went through quite a bit of issues when I was in Newburyport with updating the zoning law, and I know they've done it again since I left there back in 1994. But you need those tools to preserve your character. And the bylaws start here, right? You're going to work with your zoning board. The bylaws are going to be something that you're all going to take a look at. Town meeting's probably going to have a say in it. It's inevitable, but you need to have those policies in place so that they're evenly enforced and implemented. Yeah. The concept of trying to do something because, in this case it says shall versus may or may versus shall. I don't like to play those games. Mm-hmm. Let's be upfront. Let's not hide what we're trying to do here. And I think that in some cases, you got to watch developers. I'm not saying they're all bad, but they're trying to make a dollar. That's mm-hmm. their thing. And if you want to preserve rural character, then you need to have policies in place.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess finally, what is your expectation and availability for hours of employment, and when are you available to start?
Well, in the short amount of time that I watched your selectmen's meeting, I noticed that there was some discussion about whether it to be part-time or full-time.
And the board ultimately decided that they would like someone full-time.
Yeah, and I would be amenable to that. Perhaps 4 long days and having Friday off. I gave some thought to the concept of what would I do? I'm not going to commute every day from Danvers to Carver. Oh, no. See, she doesn't want me to do it either. But there's a Hampton Inn 10 minutes down the road. And stay there. If I drive down Monday morning and I stay there through Wednesday night, come to work Thursday, and work a 4-day, 40-hour week that way, I would, be in favor of that. If that's a condition of employment that you need to have me here all 5 days, I'm sure we can work that out as well. What was the second part of the question?
When are you available to start?
Oh, well, I do have 2 things planned. I'm away December 30th through January 5th. And the second thing is from the 9th to the 12th of January, but I can move that around if I need to. But essentially, other than those time frames there, I can start tomorrow.
Great.
I know it's Christmas week and all that, but.
Well, we have a current town administrator whose contract is
December
extending
31st.
on 12/31. So,
right.
But it's somewhere in there. But there's some flexibility. But okay, what else Is there anything else you'd like us to know? Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Yeah, I can do this. I can combine my experience at the local level, at the state level, with my knowledge of government, and I can make this happen for you. What I've read, it's been kind of a bit of a rocky road. The kind of person who can come in and make things better and understand communication. And one of the ways I'll explain that is I'm used to people yelling at me. I'm a football official. People scream at me all the time. That's just part of the deal. As I said to Ms. Bogart, I did the Abington-Rockland Super Bowl game. They were yelling the whole game, you know? And at the end of the game, they came up and they said, you know, you guys did a great job. It's emotion, it's passion. I have the ability, I think, through my experience, to cut through that, to understand, you know, everyone wants to try to get somewhere. We can make that happen. We just have to communicate, slow down a little bit, work it out, and get it ready for the next person to come in. Because the next person who's going to come in, I would hope for your sake, is going to be around a while. That's what every town, I think, strives for. Where I live now, Danvers, the town manager was there for like 25 years. You know, and it's an extremely well-run town. They're having their problems in the press right now with some of the things at the high school and you know, kids being kids and doing stupid things. But the town itself is very well run, and there's something to be said for that continuity. You know, I can't do that. I'm restricted in how much I can work. I can only work 1,200 hours. I can only make a certain amount of money. Frankly, I would love to be able to do it on a full-time basis. Because as I said in the beginning, there's only so much golf you can play. My handicap has come down 3 strokes. I'm happy about that, but frankly, I've had enough golf.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anything else from the board? Ms. Ewens?
Yes, thank you. Could you tell us what you do know about the projects that are happening in Carver and how those projects may affect our public safety departments?
No, I can't.
Okay.
I can tell you that I'm a very blunt, very detail-oriented person. So probably the first thing I'm going to find out if I came in was, what are all the issues? What are all the issues? And that's, you know, I'm going to have it with each one of you. I'm going to have it with each department head. I would meet individually with each person, and then we'd have the staff meeting. One of the things I did in all of the travel that I did through the Commonwealth was, when I got there, I knew what was going on. Okay? Honestly, I didn't have the opportunity to prepare for this. We've had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, just to try to get things squared away. Some travel was involved. So, and there's not a lot on the web, you know? I mean, I've tried. I went on the web, and Wicked Local covers stuff every once in a while. But there's not a lot available on the web. Now, so can I give you answers to those questions? No, I know about the battery issue. I know that you built a new school, but I can come in tomorrow, sit down, and work with everybody and make sure I understand all the issues. Because in the job I had before, if you're not detail-oriented and you're not thorough, you're not going to succeed. And I succeeded in that job. I was appointed in 1994. I was reappointed in 2000, 2006, 2012, and 2018, unanimously by a bipartisan board. I know how to get the job done.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, Mr. Sullivan, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Our next interview is at approximately 1:30, and we will be in recess until then. I will call the meeting back to order. The next interviewee today for us is Mr. Thomas Guarino. Mr. Guarino, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
So you're aware what we're doing today, what our program is, to sort of go around the room and ask questions, and then at the end we'll give you an opportunity to make the board aware of anything you think we may have missed or anything you'd like to let us know. So why don't we get started? Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. What made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your interest?
Well, I've been very interested in Carver for a couple of years, as I think at least some of the members of the board may know. I applied last time for the interim position and was hoping to apply for the full-time position. I have since I've left Bourne, I've been in Wareham almost weekly, working for the town administrator, doing some wastewater analysis and that type of thing. So I'm always down here. I like the town. I like the rural part of the town. I like the agricultural bent to the town, as well as it's a town of a size. You know, you got about a $50 million corporation going here in Town Hall. It's a nice workable number for me to work with. You have a pretty good track record in Carver, at least amongst the other communities, of being a good community. It's really something that's interested me for quite a while, and I'm kind of glad to have the chance to come back and give it another shot.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hewens?
So I think, can I substitute the question I asked our last candidate at the end for this? Because
Sure.
you've already kind of answered what I was going to ask. So could you tell us what you know about the projects that are happening in Carver right now?
Sure.
And how these projects affect, in particular, our public safety departments?
Okay. I'm not going to be as intelligent about that as I probably should be. I know that there's a lot of work going on with the Economic Development Commission, a piece of property and some work that I think has to go back out down there. I'm not really familiar with the public safety issues as it relates to the police and fire department. I know how your fire department works today. I did not know that 2 years ago. I can be taught, so I'm aware of how that works. But I have, other than reading into the Wicked Local newspaper and kind of scanning some of your select board meetings and going through some of the other meetings, I'm not able to give you any detail intelligently, and I don't want to try to fluff it.
Okay, fine, thank you.
All right, thank you. What do you think are the major challenges and opportunities to face Carver now and in the future?
Well, like every community in the Commonwealth, I think the big elephant in the room continues to be COVID. How you are going to assign that ARPA money that came in through the county, what your plans are for that in the short and the midterm. I think keeping the agricultural base, keeping Carver. There's been a lot of encroachment throughout the state on production land. And that's one of the things I think we would always need to be careful of, be sure the zoning is in such a way and your agricultural preservation is in such a way that you can continue the, if you will, the rhythm of Carver as it is. Towns that are south of Boston, even down when I was in Bourne, we were starting to get pressures down there to become more of a commuting community than a life, work, live community. And I think those are things you need to be careful of as time goes on. Budget is always something that you really need to keep an eye on. You have a split tax rate, I know, and how is that starting to move in one way or another? Your assessors, I just want to take an aside. I did happen to watch the meeting where you set the tax rate a few weeks ago, and your assessors did a phenomenal job in explaining it so someone who doesn't work in this field would be able to understand it. And that's an aside, and give them.
Thank you for recognizing that, because they did do an extraordinary job.
Yeah, they really did. So you have those types, you have growth pressures, you have school cost pressures, you have the same pressures that most other communities have, but Carver's a little unique in how its industrial bases, or its agricultural commercial bases. And that's always in more threat than, if you will, than a lot of brick and mortar industries. I go back to a time when I was with the Rural Development Council, and I don't want to drone here, but I just want to, when we first started, I'd come down to the experiment station in Plymouth with the Commissioner of Ag every year. And things were really good, things were really good. And then there was a year that Wisconsin beat out Massachusetts for cranberry production. And all of a sudden there was a glut of cranberries, and that put real pressure on this whole area. So those are even though it's not municipal, you have to keep track of those kinds of markets and those things that are happening. Because you have to be able to forecast for the community how that's doing. The unemployment rate here kind of stayed fairly even during the last year and a half. It's come down a little bit. There was a loss of about 430 jobs, at least according to the Department of Local Services and the materials that I looked at. But that's 400's a lot. It may not be a big percentage, but it's a lot of people that may need some help. So you have to keep those kinds of things in track. You got to keep the spending down. I think that is a key in any community. I don't want to say run it like a business, because municipalities are not a business. Their model is upside down from that. It's not a profit-driven organization. Enterprise funds are a little different. But it's a service delivery, and you can squeeze efficiencies and still put those types of services out. I think you want to work with the department leaders. You have a good set of department leaders. Elaine's been very helpful, by the way, during this whole process. And your finance, I don't know if it came from the accountant or the treasurer, sent me some materials, and it was very, very helpful and thankful. I thank you for that. Public safety, I'm sure your EMS is busier every year. More calls, even though I know how the fire runs, but it's still more calls. There's more pressure on the people that are working in that. What are your schedules in that? Is it a 1 in 4? Is it a 1 in 5? 1114, 1115. If your calls get to be a lot, maybe you look at a 1115, so people have a chance to recover from a 24-hour shift if they're out busy. I'm kind of going in a number of different directions. I understand it's kind of a shotgun approach, but those are the types of things I think you need to be able to look at every day. You got winter coming on with Public Works. What kind of winter is it going to be? What's your snow and ice, and do you have enough? I know you can carry it over, and it's one you can make up, but you in shape for the winter, assuming we have a bad winter? You get another storm like you had down here a few weeks ago. That could put a real chill on a lot of different budgets. And how do you go to your free cash? For that, you're only at about 3% free cash right now, as of 20. Your stabilization is good, but your free cash is, I would think, is a little light to where you may want to build it up to. And you got to look at your capital items as well.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart.
Your resume said you live in Vermont now. Do you have an established residency down here?
I have an established place to stay here, where I stayed in Middleborough. The last 3 years of my run in Bourne, I stayed in Middleborough, and that is still available to me. So I would stay here certainly during the week. And if there was a weekend activity, if the basketball team got into the finals, or if the senior play, if the theater club was I like to attend those things. I think it's important to be part of the community that you're in. One of the things, if you choose to move me forward, that you will never have to be concerned with is, where is he? I'm generally first in, last out. I do go home weekends, for sake. And if you were to go into an executive session, I could explain a lot of reasons why that is. I can't do that in public session.
And then, what do you think the most important thing that an interim town administrator can do for a town that's in transition?
Two things. One, you can't mark time. It shouldn't be a mark time position. There are projects on the books. There are things that the select board expects to get done. You're getting in toward if it's not at the middle, you're getting into budget season. There's town meeting that needs to be prepared for. The warrant has to be put together. Your tax rate's been set, so that's not an issue that you have to deal with. You want to work with your public safety. It's not a marked time, it's a continuation. I think there's a lot of, you would look at, I call it SAR, assess the situation, what actions need to be taken, and what are the results that can be shown that are measurable. I don't see this as a, let's just carry it over till the next person takes over. I think there's work to be done. I think you have to be a little bit more in tune with the select board, perhaps on a daily basis or a more frequent basis than you would be if you were doing this on a regular, full-time basis, because you don't know the rhythms. And those are the things that you'd look to the elected leaders to help you with.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I think I mentioned previously, and for those folks watching at home, one of our members, Bob Belvin, is on vacation. He was joining us earlier remotely, but he had to catch a flight. So I'm going to ask his questions for him, and he's going to watch these interviews a little bit later. So this is one of Bob's questions. What have you done to understand Carver's financial and budgeting process?
The process, I have only watched a little bit on TV, and I've done some reading of old minutes, working with the Finance Committee, how the budget's been presented. Knowing your budget, I think I'm probably in better shape than many, because it's one of the areas that I enjoy, and I've kind of taken a mid-dive. I haven't taken a deep dive. I don't want to say that I know the intricacies. But you know, your police budget, your school budget, where your money is spent, you know, I don't know if you've set your goals and priorities for the budget already for the upcoming year. And, you know, we'd want to look at those and how do they fit into the mix. Are you adding people are you looking to add people? One of the things when I was administrator in other communities, if people wanted new staff people, they shouldn't ask for them the year they want them. You need to be able to plan for them and be able to work the budget around those types of things. There's emergencies, of course, if you know, especially public safety right now, it's really hard to recruit in police. So those are there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, you know, when's the public hearing for the budget? I want to certainly work with the Finance Committee, the accountant, the treasurer. I think you should, I don't know how many public hearings you have on the budget, but there certainly should be at least 2, so that people can come in and kind of do a town meeting 101, not deliberate, but at least see where the money's going and what you're doing with that. If there's one place where I don't think the select board would have to worry is getting up to speed with the budgetary process and moving that forward.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you. You touched on it a little bit, but what do you feel the role of the select board is in working with the interim town administrator?
In general terms, the select board is always the policy setting board. It is not the day-to-day operation board or who came in 5 minutes late today. That's, you know, that's not what I would expect my relationship to be with the board. Although I would see the relationship with the chair and the town administrator to probably be a little closer, more frequent than it would be with the other board members. You have to set the consent agenda. You have to do those types of things. But I would also hope that the board would be supportive and perhaps indulge whoever the interim is in a couple of extra meetings. I know extra meetings are hard. To really get down into the nitty gritty on a couple of things, especially in the first month or so, first month and a half, where we could sit down and really talk through what is it that's been done, where do you see that there have been areas that need additional attention. Again, without getting into John or Jane are coming to work 5 minutes late every day, you need to get on that. That's something that, you know, that takes different, or somebody took a 45-minute lunch instead of a half-hour lunch. That's not, those are things I'll take care of if it's necessary. But setting, I think you need to set the tone and you need to set the pace. I think that's what the select board really should be doing in the interim. And generally speaking, in the long term, I think that's your role.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. What was the professional accomplishment that you are most proud of? and the one that you most regret.
I've got a bag full of both. I've been little, these gray hairs came with some work. There are a couple of professional, if I could hit two quickly, and I'll make them quick. One didn't have to do anything with municipal management. One had to do with my work with the Rural Development Council. We got a call on a Thursday afternoon to put together for the Federal Department of Health and Human Services the most pressing health care need in the Commonwealth by Monday for rural towns of 10,000 or less at that time. Over the weekend, I was able to pull together people from the state, federal, medical, large hospitals, small practices together, and we were able to work on it, and we came up with what these folks thought were the answer. I facilitated. As it turns out, we were one of only 3 of the 40 states that were able to get it done, and we received, it's not a lot of money in municipal terms, but $100,000, and this was a 2-person operation to continue that thought. So that was one I'm really proud of. From a municipal perspective, I've done an awful lot of public works construction. There was a community I worked in where we built a water treatment facility, a wastewater treatment upgrade, replaced 30% of the water pipe and 28% of the sewer pipe, and ran an inverted siphon pipe or a force main 4.5 miles up to an industrial park, and we did that in 2 years. And it was in 90% money when 75% was coming from the state, federal, and 15% coming from the state. Those were 90% dollars, but back in the time that was done, it was $22 million worth of capital improvements, which today would be over $100 million worth of capital improvements. In Bourne, I think so I'll make it 3, I'm sorry. My largest, I think, accomplishment was, with a lot of pain on all sides, was taking the town from a full-time select board thought process. Even though I was 2 years in, I came in after the first person, it was still that mindset. And through a lot of hard work by a lot of people, getting the town into a professional management mode, where the person who replaced me didn't have the issues of the vestiges of the full-time board. And that was really hard when you had 200 years of that type of governance.
And could you follow up with the one
yeah.
situation that you most regret?
I made a mistake, and it was well publicized. There was without getting into the details because there's court action that was involved, I allowed a lateral transfer of a particular civil service employee while there were some legal actions going on that may have involved that person. And I should not have done that. And live and learn. But it wasn't huge in the scope of what we did every day, but it was certainly a mistake.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. You may remember this question because I asked the same one last time that you interviewed previously, but what are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including our emergency management department? And I ask that because we do have a setup here that's a little bit different than many other towns.
It works. I think that's the key. It appears to work. Your EMS and your fire is different. Your fire is In a perfect world, I probably wouldn't set it up that way. I would set it up more traditionally with full-time people all the time, as opposed to the nighttime coverage.
I'm sorry, which department are you talking about?
I'm thinking the fire, EMS, I believe.
Well, so the fire and the EMS are separate
Right.
departments. Yeah.
Some towns have that and it works well. I've only worked in communities where it was either private for EMS or it was incorporated into the fire department where they had EMT paramedics. I like the latter better because you have some control on trainings and being sure that people keep up on their points and all the things they need to do for their certifications. Yeah, if I had my way, I'd change it, but it works here, and I would want to get into the weeds a lot more than just the peripherals to be able to come up with any cogent recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask for one clarification on that? So you said you would set it up where it was full-time. Which department would you make full-time?
I would put it into your fire department,
You would put what? Into
EMS.
I see. Okay, thank you.
All right. Again, this is another question from Mr. Belden. How do you handle human resource issues and discipline of employees?
There needs to be a progressive discipline policy that permeates all non-public safety departments. Public safety has their own generally disciplinary roles unless it comes to a termination hearing or termination of that type of thing. The chief of police knows how to take care of his or her people, and the same with fire. I would certainly be work with the HR, assistant TAHR on a lot of things, but I've had to, over my tenure, hire, fire, discipline, suspend, demote, promote, everyone down from entry-level worker to senior department leaders. And you need to document expectations of what the employees are expected to do need to be clear. Mistakes are not generally fatal, and they should be seen as the ability to learn and set goals to do things better over the next period of time. I've had last chance agreements with employees as well. Mistakes sometimes equal growth. If it's flagrant and it has a detrimental implication on the corporate function or the public safety, those are things that can't be tolerated. But if there are mistakes in a spreadsheet, or if there are mistakes that a plow broke, or we got too close to the edge of the road type of thing, those are teachable, those are correctable if they're good employees. You really should have a well-documented review system where you can set up goals, check in at least once a year on those goals. Your department leaders would put it down, would have them for your line staff. The town administrator would have them set for the department leaders. You need to make sure that when you hire, you cast as broad a net as you can. You hire local when you can if they're qualified, but don't hire local if they're not qualified just because they're local.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
I have a little bit of tread worn on the tires. I don't get excited too much anymore. There's not a lot that can happen that I haven't seen. I'm really good with working with the department heads. I try to help them, not man. They know how to run their departments. I hope you wouldn't have them here if they didn't. But I try to be a guide and enhance what they're doing. You're coming into a very busy time of year. I think that from a budgetary perspective and being able to sit down in the seat with a very little startup time, there are certain ways, forms will be different and things like that. But running the municipality is not going to be something hard for me to get up to speed on. I will give you information timely, evenly. There's nothing worse than one member having information that the other members don't have. If there's something that you want to have done as an individual select board member, if it costs any money or it's going to take any staff time, it needs to come to the full board. I don't do favors. Just so you know that I don't do that. But I can come in here, sit in the seat, work with your department leaders, get this budget ready, get the warrant ready, work with the finance department, work with your department heads, and be ready to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
How are you going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiative among department heads? So I guess the larger question is about your management style.
That's more of a long-term question, but in the short term, fostering professionalism is setting expectations clearly. Making sure that all of the folks that we have working with us, if there's, these are simple things, if they're licensed or they have a, from police all the way into DPW, if their hoister's license has expired, why? Those are the types of things you need to be able to look at. But you meet with your department leaders, you find out what's going well in their departments and where their heartburn is. And if there's a way to be able to give them an antacid for that heartburn and make things work a little smoother for them, you do that. But you have to listen to the people that work here in order to be able to foster trust and professionalism. It's going to be really difficult for any interim to come in and say, trust me. Because they don't know you, you're a flash in the pan, you may or may not be here later on. So you have to listen to them. And the other thing that I think is really important is respecting the frontline personnel as well. The folks in the assessor's office or the town clerk's office, this is more town hall. They really know what the pulse is. What's going on day to day, minute to minute, and how our customer service is and how our folks are how the citizens are being treated. Make sure that they have the tools they need to be able to provide first-class customer service. And that's one of the things that I will stress if I'm selected. Quick story. If someone comes into town hall and they go to the assessor's office, they have a problem. People come into town hall, it's to pay a bill, get a permit, and find out what they can't do with their land. So it's not always a positive experience when they come in. Someone comes into the assessor's office and it really finds out that person belongs in the treasurer's office, and how you're set up office to office. I didn't look downstairs, but instead of just pointing and saying, okay, Mr. Smith, Mrs. Jones, you need to go down here. That person, the staff should should get up out of the chair, walk the person down to the office where they belong and say, this is Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith. They have a problem with this. Could you help them? So that they feel that there's somebody caring about what their issue is. It's really important.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bogart?
Earlier, you said a challenge facing the town would be keeping Carver Carver. What is rural character to you, and what would you do in your role to maintain the rural character of Carver?
Again, this is a short-term gig, if you will, as see it. But some of the things you'd want to look at is where are there pressure points on the agricultural community? I don't know what those are right now in Carver, okay? So I don't want to speak like intelligently to that. But where I grew up, it was early on in my life, it was tobacco. It was big tobacco, and it was asparagus, and it was celery. Where are the pressure points? How can the Economic Development Commission or through the town administrator, mass ag or mass business development help with, are there value-added products that we could put together to expand the agricultural base? Cranberries, as an example, does craisins. They do all kinds of other things. But there may be other parts of what they do that can expand out their business opportunities. They know it better than I do. That's why they're in it and I'm not. But I might be the caveat. Is there federal money coming down under this infrastructure that's going to be able to help them as well? I don't know about the Build Back Better plan. I don't know if that's going to ever pass or not, but there's certainly money coming down from an infrastructure perspective. Is there something that we can do with public-private partnerships on drainage? Now, the ag atmosphere, that should be celebrated. I don't know if you do a fall festival or a spring festival or those types of things. Those that can bring the community together that may travel to Boston every day, that may have nothing, really don't know what's going on out on the road where the bogs are. Bring people together. There are educational things you can do. There's lots of stuff, but in a 6-month stint or an 8-month stint, I'm not sure there's going to be a huge impact that can be made by an interim.
Okay.
Thank you. And I guess finally, what's your expectation and availability for hours of employment, and when are you available to start?
Hours, I would expect to be here on a daily basis.
In town hall on a daily basis?
Yes.
Okay.
Be it I don't know if you're on a 4-day week or a 5-day week. If I could do it in 4 days, it would be great, but if it needs to be 5, it's 5, and that's okay. As I said, I have a place to stay, and it's not an issue. Out of respect for my current employer, I would want to give 3 weeks' notice, not 2.
Okay.
We're kind of in the middle of something right now that I need to finish up.
Well, that's fine. Okay. And I guess finally, is there anything else you would like to tell the board? Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
No, I think I can only reiterate that there wouldn't be a lot of learn time if you were to bring me in. I know the mechanics of municipal government. I know the mechanics of board administrator relations. I know what needs to be done between now and May. I know what needs to be done with ARPA. I know I can get a good relationship going with your public safety chiefs as well as your other department leaders. And the only other thing is I'm not going to try to be knowing everything about everything all the time. I'm going to lean on your good department leaders to be able to give me their take on things, as well as how their operation runs. I see it as a manager of a spider web, if you will. I don't know what the word I'm trying to use, but really, network of networks, I guess would be the best way to do it, is to say that. Manage a network of networks.
Thank you. Is there anything else from the board? Ms. Hewens?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on one of my questions. I know if you are hired, you'll only be here for a short time, but in that time, how would you instill self-esteem and trust among employees?
Well, at department head meetings, okay, I would have the attaboys, if you will, every month on small successes. If the recreation department on Trunk or Treat had 35 cars this year and they had 18 cars the year before, that's an attaboy for that type of work. If there's a promotion in the police department in fire, you know, you highlight that. You bring that person into the select board, and maybe they already do, and you highlight that. If someone in the assessing department comes up with maybe accounting, a new spreadsheet that maybe saves some time or adds another column that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it saves, you know, a lot of research time just by doing this. You celebrate that. You make sure people know that they are appreciated. I'm very much in favor of where it's cost effective and makes sense. Let people go to professional development opportunities so that they can get better at what they do and they can see that you recognize they have the capacity.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right, Mr. Guarino, thank you very much. We expect to make a decision relatively soon, and we will be in touch.
I thank you for having me. The good thing is I generally come down on Thursdays. That's generally my day. So I'm going to pop over to Wareham because I have a son with some disabilities, and he's an adult son with disabilities, but I depend on all of the public libraries in the Commonwealth to keep him happy, and so I'm going to stop over at Wareham.
Thank you, and we appreciate you accommodating our schedule.
No, it's fine.
Thank you.
We
very
will
much.
be in a very brief recess while we bring in our next candidate.
Elaine.
I'll call the meeting back to order. The next person on our interview schedule today is Carter Terenzini. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Terenzini.
Thank you for having me today.
And thank you for accommodating our schedule today. We appreciate it. Just so you know, what we're doing today is sort of going around the room, asking some general questions, and then at the end we'll give you an opportunity to tell us anything you'd like to know, and we'll go from there.
Sure.
All right. So I guess we'll start off with Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. What made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your interest?
Well, I enjoy interim work. I retired from full-time work about 5 years ago. Oh, golly, 6 years ago now. I enjoy interim work. The current position that I'm finishing up has been less than rewarding. And I am aware of the community from having friends in the area and having some acquaintance with some of your former and current leadership. I think that geographically it works for me. It works for me from the interim standpoint of view, and I think it's a good community that I could help shepherd through the period of time until you have permanent leadership. Those kinds of opportunities don't come along always. There happen to be 3 of them open right this minute. I hope that doesn't say something about my profession. But I find them interesting opportunities and pursue them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hewens.
Thank you. My first question is, why do you want to come to the town of Carver in particular?
Well, having having dealt now with 4 extremely challenging communities, the opportunity to help shepherd one that, from everything I can see, is on sound financial footing with good leadership and a good team, where I can contribute the knowledge that I have and not spend a lot of it taking extra blood pressure medication, is attractive to me. It's also geographically convenient for me, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you. What do you believe are the major challenges and opportunities being that Carver faces now and in the future?
Well, I think that the major challenge that you face is the most immediate short-term one, which is choosing. I once referred to it as permanent leadership, and I was reminded by the select board that it was only permanent between meetings. But choosing a longer-term chief administrative officer that fits with the board, provides the skill set that you need. I think that that's a major challenge today. It is becoming more increasingly difficult for municipalities to recruit talent. There are some areas where it's still quite possible, public works, recreation, planning. However, there are some areas in municipal government, the chief administrative officer in particular. I'm sure you're in contact with your peers, East Bridgewater, Westport, other communities. Templeton went through several failed attempts before they could find someone that, and actually sort of built a model of mentoring someone to bring them along. That is a major challenge that I believe you need to address as expeditiously as possible with an end result that you're satisfied with. Beyond that, I think that population growth will continue to strain smaller communities, which like to think of themselves as the one community I'm dealing with right now. They're 6,500 and growing, and yet they still have a government model that is structured around volunteers when it was 3,000 people just 20 years ago. They haven't adjusted. And so I think the continuing need for government to adjust to the realities and the regulations is a real challenge. Finally, while you are not on the coastline, you're going to be increasingly impacted by the impacts of climate change. And you're only Carver, and you may not be able to contribute greatly to the solution, but you have to be prepared for those changes, whether you're, parts of Harlem and New York City, or you're along the seacoast itself, or you are expected to get the well over 6 feet of snow in the Sierra Mountains. You have to be prepared for it, and that's a difficult challenge to get people to accept that you have to take those actions, because it's happening elsewhere. It's happening to other people, These are not well accepted in many parts of the nation, and yet you are the leadership that has to set the path on these challenges. So I won't be here long enough to pivot you through all those things, but long term, I think that you need to have leadership that accepts and understands those challenges. And they're not the norm for municipal government. That's the other challenge. Getting, you're the folks who get firefighters to the house and get the EMS there and get the potholes patched, and to talk about some of these more esoteric things on town meeting floor, perhaps, or elsewhere. People are sort of like, that's not our job. It is.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart.
What do you think the most important thing that an interim town administrator can do for a town that's in transition?
I think it depends upon the challenges that are put before it. So I've stepped into communities that were in great flux, either for financial reasons, or perhaps they had terminated the leadership, and they had great organizational challenges that faced them. And those are presented by the board. In one community, it was kind of nice because the charter said the temporary town administrator could only act upon ministerial matters and matters not admitting of delay. So, if they came with this giant issue that maybe a town administrator or town manager would normally handle, I could sometimes say, nope, that's admitting of delay, I can't do it. So that has to really be set by what's going on, because in another community, it was pretty clear that the first thing that had to happen, two of the communities, the first thing that I had to do stepping in the door was balance a budget. They'd adopted a budget at the annual town meeting for various reasons in two communities that was out of balance, each one actually was out of balance by about $250,000, which had to be settled before the recap was done. So I'd have to chat with you all and see what your priorities are. The biggest challenge for an interim town manager or interim town administrator is being careful to not wade into issues that many people do not feel are appropriate for an interim to be tackling. Let's wait for and I'm going to use the phrase permanent administrator yet again. In some cases that can be happen, especially if it appears you're on the cusp of succeeding in recruiting someone. In other cases, an interim has to wade into issues that many people would say, why are you doing that? You're only supposed to be here to get the boat from this port to that port. Well, sometimes it's just not that simple. Sometimes there are things that come up. And so that is, I think, a question of judgment and direction from this board that is sometimes out of our control and can cause difficulty in how people view your stewardship through getting the boat from port A to port B.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Could I just have a follow-up question for that?
Sure.
So, Mr. Terenzini, you said that there are some issues that you think are not appropriate for an interim town administrator to wade into. Could you give us some examples of some of those issues?
I'm not saying they're not appropriate. I'm saying they're not timely. They're not ripe for an interim to wade into. Let's say that there is a building committee. It's been ongoing for a while. And they all of a sudden reach some sort of crisis. If that can be delayed a little bit until the permanent leadership is in place, I think that's a good idea. Let's say that a community is looking at the development of a public water supply. I mean, I have Foxborough's doing this right now. They want $600,000, closer to $800,000 of ARPA money. That would be 50% of what the community's getting. It would be taking it off the boards. Yet the community writ large hasn't decided it wants to develop this public water supply. Frankly, I've kind of stayed away from it a little bit and instead figure out how to parse the questions. You want 800,000? You want to take 50% of the ARPA grant off the books for 3 years when you don't even know if the community really wants to do this yet, and the location where you want to put the well, they're not willing to give you, and you don't know if the community is going to give you eminent domain authority? Oh, and the last time you tested it was 13 years ago? You don't even know if the quality's still the same and if it'll pass a water pump test of capacity? How about instead of $800,000, we get you $100,000 and we get you into the upcoming special town meeting to get you the authority to enter onto the lands and do what you need to do. And we'll try to hold some of these monies back for a while we develop a spend plan on the balance. That allows me as an interim town administrator to help them find a path forward that lets them take some immediate action so they don't think I'm just stonewalling them. That lets them get to a meeting of the town where the town can weigh in on this again and can keep the project moving without saying no and getting horns locked over the whys and wherefores. So that is an example of where if I just said, yeah, sure, I think the interim town administrator would be recommending to set aside of 50% of the monies on a project that really has not yet been signed off on by the community. If I say no, I'm going to have an extremely angry committee that thinks I'm just stonewalling them. So sometimes you have to figure out how to thread the needle in a manner that lets people keep moving forward. And not just to delay the decision, but to structure the decisions in a manner where you keep getting checkoffs. Yep, without fully committing.
Thank you, I appreciate that answer.
Thank you. One of our members, Mr. Bob Belvin, is actually on vacation. He was able to join us earlier via Zoom for a couple of questions in Hawaii, but he had to catch a flight, so I'm going to ask his questions for him, and he'll review this meeting at a little later time.
Certainly.
So one of his questions is, what have you done to understand Carver's financial and budgeting process?
I'm going to be point blank honest with you. Not a great deal. If you have Googled Boxborough at all, you will see we are currently in the process of being investigated. Not me personally. I haven't been there long enough for that. The select board found it warranted to request an investigation of its police department by the FBI's public corruption unit.
Could you speak into the microphone
Yes.
a little bit
no.
and say that again?
My apologies.
That's okay.
I'm not repeating it for shock value, am I? Okay.
I just want to be able to hear what you're saying.
Okay, certainly. I didn't realize this was tied into your PA system. Often they're just for your cable television system. So my days over the last few weeks since looking at this I have been spent with talking a member of your current leadership team to get a sense of what's going on, and frankly consumed by responses to public records inquiries and inquiries for records from other units. Let me say that I've now done this interim position in 4 communities where I've had to step in. And I'm a quick study. I'm thought to be very well versed in public finance, and I can hope you would feel comfortable that within just a few days of being here, I would have a pretty good handle on how you will do your local budget process. Every community is slightly different. In Templeton, we moved to an omnibus line item department control. Everything's controlled by a total number for each department. Each community is different. I'll have to sit and learn that. And frankly, there's no way around that except for having a budget book in hand and talking with your finance committee chair and your staff that actually puts their budget together. I'm going to assume you are most likely head into that already. And I will follow the path rather than beating down the path.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Hoffman.
What do you feel the role of the select board is in working with the interim town administrator?
Set a clear group of priorities. That are realistic given the length of time you expect someone to be there, and are of the greatest and most immediate urgency. And recognize that while for much of the staff it may be business as usual, for an interim it is more, oh golly, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without using an expression that some folks might find objectionable. It's for an interim, it's more sniper fire than shotgun. We have to be focused, and we have a narrower range of vision over what's going on. And we have to keep in perspective, we're the interim, and the board needs to keep in perspective, we're the interim. There's different expectations, different level of activity. And there's always that, you can't be roiling the staff with, why are you doing that? You're only here for a little bit. You have to be very careful about that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens?
What was the professional accomplishment that you were most proud of and the one that you most regret?
Central Annex.
Sorry?
Pittsfield, Central Annex, Pittsfield, Massachusetts, the first community college. Cape Cod Community College would tell you they're the first, which was the old high school for Pittsfield, then transferred to the state for use as Berkshire Community College. The college built a new campus. You're going to have to bear with me because sometimes this has an impact upon me. We converted it to 60 or 62 units of housing for the elderly, a part of a larger, what we called inner core redevelopment program for the city. I and others helped move some of those folks into those apartments and saw what they came out of.
And what? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last thing you said.
There. And saw the units that they came out of.
Ah.
And providing them with safe, decent, being part of providing them with safe, decent, affordable housing as the city's first commissioner of community and economic development is my single proudest achievement.
Thank you.
My biggest personal disappointment is Moultonborough, New Hampshire has been grappling with whether or not it needs to build a community center for its recreation department, youth and seniors for 20 plus years. And I was assigned the task with trying to bring that to fruition. That did not go well, notwithstanding many folks who thought we did a great job in reorganizing how to do it, designing it so it could be built in phases. When that effort did not work, succeeding what we call a blue ribbon commission, trying to get an independent group of citizens who basically came up with they had no prior connection with it. That effort did not work. We just couldn't move it across the finish line. And when given a task and I can't move it across the finish line, I always find that exceedingly disappointing. So it's a toss-up between that and the direction I was given at one time by the same select board to undertake a unfortunate personnel matter. And I did it as they directed. And they stood behind me, 8 or 10 miles behind me. And that did not go well. So those two would be a toss-up as to my biggest professional disappointments in my career.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including our emergency management department?
I need to be perfectly honest with you. You will find me never anything less. I have not invested them at great length, and I would need probably the first week here to be able to respond in a meaningful manner.
Okay. And fair enough. And our next question is also from Mr. Belvin, who's not with us. How do you handle human resource issues and discipline of employees?
Well, they're never fun, but you can't shy away from them. So first, I would need to review what your local process is. It's different in every community. I would need to talk with the superintendent, supervisor, commissioner, director, whatever the title of that particular department is, town accountant, town treasurer, town clerk. And I'm always start with the view that the most valuable resource we have as an organization is our people. In fact, it's the only resource we have. We don't have gravel pits. We don't make widgets. We don't have machinery that, robotically welds parts. It's our people. I'm going to estimate that between pension, fringe benefits, insurance, and personnel costs, they're on the order of 70% of your general fund budget. Finding new people is expensive. Going through the disruption of vacancies or employees that become disgruntled can poison the well. And the loss of institutional knowledge can be incalculable. So my approach to human resources when they reach me first is to ensure that my conversations with department heads of, this is your responsibility, let's talk about how it could happen. Might you suggest this? Have you tried this? Have you tried this? Let me coach you. Let me help you. Let's see where we are. P.S. You're the first level. You don't get to skate on that responsibility and just toss me the grenade. Happy to talk with you about how to navigate through the minefield, but you don't get your first line of defense to be to toss it to me. That can be a mentoring experience, and it can be a challenging experience. And sometimes you're dealing with department heads who truly want to do the right thing. They've never had to do it before. They don't know exactly how to approach it. There may be a particular situation that they've just never occurred before. And they're seeking advice, and I'm there to offer that advice and to help them think through. It's more of a Socratic approach, if you will, than a do it this way. I find do it this way doesn't always work well, ever since my teenage daughter told me I was not the boss of her. Now, once that gets to me, I am again framed by two things. Our personnel are our most important asset, and we need to at all times try to make sure we're helping to improve their performance and their continued employment by this organization. The second piece is that everything must be measurable and compounded. So in the memorandum that I end up writing, they're called performance consultations. They're not even called disciplines. Here's what happened. Here's what you've acknowledged. Here's what I've said. Here's our expectation going forward. Now, I come from the day of typewriters still. And so if there are a lot of typos, I still use this example because it's the easiest one. The first question I would ask the clerk is, does the typewriter work okay? Do we need to get it fixed? What are the tools we can give you? Do you need a typing class? We have to recognize that we have a responsibility to help that employee not only meet our expectations, but to improve such that they can meet that expectations. Sir Richard Branson said, train your employees so they can leave you, treat them so they won't. If you kind of put that overall as the umbrella, that is my sort of three-pronged generic approach to employee performance, as best I can put it forth.
Mr. Chair, could you say that quote one more time, please, really into the microphone?
Sir Richard Branson, Virgin Airlines, Virgin, everything he starts, he calls it Virgin because it's his first. I don't really care who he is. I just want to hear what he says. Train your employees so they can leave you. Treat them so they won't.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
I don't know if I'm necessarily the best. I think I could be a good fit. And I think it's my record of success. New Durham was different. It was in turmoil. And there was an editorial at one point that advised the select board, and no disrespect to any select board, was calm down, you're getting great advice, follow the advice, and you'll be successful. And I think that if you talked in Templeton or Grafton, you would find that I came in, was able to quickly understand what the issues were, prioritize those issues, and get them resolved for them, while leaving them in Durham, New Durham, and Templeton. I crafted the succession planning. I recruited the gent for Durham. We had trouble recruiting in Templeton, so we hired a master's in public administration, and I ended up staying 4 years to mentor him and bring him along, and then they made him the town administrator. In Grafton, they would tell you that I quickly grasped a major faux pas in their override. They had a $4.2 million override, of which roughly $1 million was for a infrastructure stabilization program, but they forgot to appropriate it in year one. So under that program, if you're familiar with it, if you appropriate zero in year one, you can increase it by 2.5% in year two, which is zero. That was not good news when I had to deliver that to, and I'm happy to give you the name of the finance committee chairman. They were not happy about that. But they'd been working on this for eons and totally missed it. I found it in about a week of being there. So I am a quick study with a prove-it track record at coming in and getting out with accomplishments behind them, and staff that would speak well of my interim time with them. That's not to say that somebody else couldn't tout the same or achieve the same, but it is a proven track record.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. Could you tell us how you're going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiative among department heads?
Well, again, I want to come back to this as an interim position. So I'm going to look at where each one of them are. I'm going to have a conversation with each one of them about what their most immediate goals are. I am going to talk with them about their goal setting for their upcoming year. I am available to mentor them, to make suggestions to them. I'm not shy, but I'm here to support them, point out a wide range of knowledge that some of them may not have. I've been a community development department director, an economic development specialist for the state of Massachusetts, been a laborer at construction for 8 years, done a wide range, and introduced a relatively unique and new policing program at one point. I have a wide range of experience that they may not have from a wide range of communities, ranging from rural, 4,000 people in the summer, 4,000 in the winter, 24,000 in the summer, to a urbanized city of 52,000, plus a voracious reader. So I'm here to support them, I'm here to mentor them, I'm here to help guide them where I think they need it, but I'm not here to micromanage them, and I am an interim manager to make sure that they are taking advantage of the opportunities that I think I can point out to them. And can I just say that I do think at times select boards are looking for a skill set in an interim that perhaps is really a longer range skill set you want in that permanent administrator. I don't want to lose sight that this is an interim position. I'm assuming you're on track to go through your process. And in general, that's about a 6-month cycle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart.
What does rural character mean to you? And then in your role, albeit an interim one, What could you do to preserve Carver's rural character?
Oh, Lordy, what does rural character mean to me? Well, more importantly is what does it mean to the people of Carver? I mean, for those of you who know Vermont at all, I've lived in Poultney, Vermont, which was about 3,000 people just outside of Rutland, Vermont, had a very small village center, and a small college, which has unfortunately closed, Green Mountain College. I've lived in Moultonborough, New Hampshire, which has no commercial center of any fashion other than the first half a mile along Route 25. Everything else is either a relatively dense lakeside community or acreage nested away in the woods. And what rural means to them is we would like Starbucks, but can we not see it? I have to become a chameleon to some extent and try to understand what it means to you. And if I see a development proposal that I think would violate that, and I have an opportunity to let you know what the long-term impact is. I find in local government, in government in general, what we often forget to do is to have a global view of things, so that when the town clerk walks in and says, I'm going to do this, well, did you think about what that does to accounting and to the treasurer collector's office? Or the select board says, we're going to do this. Great. Did you think about what that's going to mean in 4 years when? So my responsibility with respect to your rural character is to try to understand what it is and to try to help you think globally and long-term when and where it's appropriate for me to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess finally, what is your expectation and availability for hours of employment? And when are you available to start?
So let's deal with the first. I have been doing these interims in about 25 hours a week. I've been giving communities 2 or 3 days a week. In some cases, that's been 2 full days. In other cases, it's been about a 10 a.m. start on one day, and maybe I'm there the third day till about noon or so. You're a little closer here from Bourne, so the is a little bit easier. And then I've been able to do the balance in general by remote. That is what most interims do. You may have some interims who are available full-time to you for whatever reason. They're in transition or they need full employment. But for someone such as myself who is retired under the Massachusetts system, I do have a cap of how many hours I can work. They had good sense during COVID to lift the cap. Otherwise, it's only school superintendents that don't have to follow that statute. I would be available within 2 weeks after us negotiating an agreement, an agreeable arrangement and contract.
Great, thank you. What else would you like to tell us? Is there anything else you'd like the board to know?
I think the only thing that's important to know about me is I can be a bit of an acquired taste, as described by one of my friends. I have some unique acronyms, some unique sayings. Some of my friends would call it Carter speak. Some folks find it quite enjoyable. Others can find it off-putting. The other thing that you need to know about me is I will be brutally honest. If something is the silliest, bloody thing I've ever heard of, I may try to find a politer way to say it, but I may be brutally honest with you as I was with one select board and say, that's the stupidest GD thing I ever heard. I think if they could dial back to when I said that, they would probably agree I was correct, that it was not a bad decision. The other thing is I will talk with you each individually and respect the privacy of those conversations, but information will be shared with all as close to the exact same time as possible, communication and respect for the board writ large is very important. I don't do favorites. The other thing that you need to know about me is I am a spreadsheet guy. I'm not always known as being warm and fuzzy. If you talked with my staff, they would tell you that when push comes to shove, I'm caring, I'm empathetic, and we had a select board member who was institutionalized for mental health issues during a period of my service with her, and I can only share this because she shared it with the entire community when she got back. Nobody knew except me. That said, I'm a data guy. I make decisions on the basis of the best policy and data without respect to... I have one right now. Someone's going to lose their job because it's the best thing for the community writ large. I can be an interesting person to get to know. But someone at the end of the day, most of my towns would say to you was, well, the right decision to have made. And I leave that for what it is, and happy to give you any references you'd like to talk with. And the names of folks who are not fond with me as well.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the board? Ms. Hewins.
I have one, yes, thank you. Given the questions that we've asked you, do you have any questions for us about the town, about how things work here?
I do not, and I'm going to tell you why. I try to, and when I have administrators who are being hired who follow me and say, well, tell me about this one, tell me about that one, I'm like, I'll sit back, I'll learn, I'll gain insights, but I try to enter without any preconceived notions of any fashion. And I know that may sound a little bit weird, but I try to depart the organizations without leaving behind preconceived notions about the staff.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is there anything else?
First, let me just say thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with new folks, and thank you very much for getting me in early.
Well, thank you for accommodating our schedule. So you're aware, we will be making a decision relatively shortly, and we will certainly be in touch.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Folks, have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you finally. Take care.
We will be in short recess until our next interview. Call the meeting back to order. Our next and last interview of the day is Mr. Robert Fennessy. Welcome, Mr. Fennessy.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Just so you're familiar with what we're doing here, what we'll do is go around the room and ask some questions. At the end, we'll give you a chance to, tell us anything you think we may have missed or anything you'd like to know, and then we'll go forward from there.
Okay.
All right. So I guess we will start with Mr. Hoffman.
Okay, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
What made you decide to apply for this position? Was there anything in particular that caught your attention, caught your interest?
Having driven through Carver almost every day going to Kingston, I know the town a little bit. I saw it in the MMA. I'm at that position in my life where I have a law practice, but I'm winding that down. And I had been a selectman for 18 years. So, and a town administrator in 2 different towns. And I thought, at this stage of my life, I want to get back into town government, town and municipal management. It's where I feel very strong, where I'm able to make an impact on a town, and I like that. I like that challenge to do that, to take a town and move it forward. So that's kind of where I'm at in life, and I saw this, just happened to be on MMA, and saw the advertisement, and I thought, wow, that's Carver. I know that town. I've been in this room before with meetings, and I think I'd be great for this. So that's why I applied anyway. Long story short.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Hewins.
Thank you. And aside from the fact that you've driven through town, which I appreciate, why do you want to come to Carver, the town of Carver in particular?
Well, I think it's a good town. It's a good sized town. I think the challenges would be similar to what I dealt with in Kingston, and I just think I'd be a good fit. So I wanted to apply. I did a little research on the town. I did a little research on the finances of the town, and I thought, this is really something that I could really enjoy doing, and I think that's probably what led me to want to come to Carver. And obviously it was one of the towns that is looking for at least an interim town administrator. And I would assume interim meaning that at the end of it, you'll be looking for a town administrator full time. So I want to at least fill that gap for the town. And that's the challenge that I see.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This sort of tags along with, I think, your answer to Ms. Hewen's questions. What do you believe are the major challenges and opportunities being the Carver faces now and in the future?
I think probably the major challenge that not only Carver faces, but my own town of Plainville and Kingston and almost every other town, is a challenge to get the biggest bang out of the buck for the town. And I say that meaning that the challenge is to look at ways to streamline things, look at ways to reduce the budget if it can be done, and take the burden off the residents. Obviously, we're in a state of COVID still, and that's had an impact on people's lives. It's had an impact on their jobs. People lost jobs, and they don't have the money that they may have had 5 years ago. And, and I'm sensitive to that, knowing that there's people that are struggling. So I think the town has to look at that and sometimes tighten the belt even more than I'm sure you guys have already done, and the finance director. But we're at that point, I think, in town government where we have to really look at what the impact is on the residents. But still, obviously, maintain the town and keep it moving forward instead of stopping it, and maybe that's through getting more industrial or commercial base. Maybe it's shifting the tax burden that way. I don't know. I mean, those are things that I'd look into.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart.
What do you think the most important thing that an interim town administrator can do for a town that's in transition?
I think the most important thing that I see is to come in not with a club, thinking you're going to bang everybody over the head and change things. Come in and look at what needs to be done. Look at where the department heads are, what their needs are, and get a sense of the whole town. And I think that's something that I would do like within the first week, is meet with all the department heads, meet with the finance director, obviously, with the Board of Selectmen, with Select Board, as you call it now, and with other stakeholders, including some residents. And I'm sure you have local residents that are constantly in town hall. And those are the ones that I think can bring an interim town administrator forward with a good handle on what everything is that's going on. So that's kind of what I see.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All
Good
right.
questions.
One of our members is actually on vacation, is unable to join us. He joined us earlier for a few interviews via Zoom, but he's actually on a flight right now. So Mr. Bellman, I told him I'd ask his questions for him. He will be viewing this interview a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But so one of his questions was, what have you done to understand Carver's financial and budgeting process?
Well, I read the financial policies, which I agree with wholeheartedly. I think it's great that the stabilization fund is there for the capital plan. I like the point where you don't take any one-time funded thing and use it for operating. Plainville did that, unfortunately, and when that runs out, it's cut, and we lost some employees that way. I think it's a great plan. That's the first thing I did, was look at that. And the second I started, unfortunately, I only knew Monday night that I was coming in here for an interview. So I started reviewing some of the minutes of the board's minutes to see what was going on and kind of get a handle on it. I mean, that's something, if I'm hired, between the time I'm hired, the time I start, obviously I'd do a lot more research on that. But I did like the financial policies.
I'm glad you took the time to read them, because a lot of time was spent putting them
Yeah.
in order, and I agree
Agree.
wholeheartedly with not using one-time money for.
Yeah, because
ongoing
again, it
expenses.
runs out, and then what?
That's,
You know?
that's exactly right.
And nobody in your position wants to make cuts, like cut personnel, you know,
Certainly
so.
Mr. Hoffman.
What do you feel the role of the select board is in working with the interim town administrator?
I think it's a critical role. I think that especially an interim, because an interim is coming in and not gaining that experience over time. So I think it's very important for the board to work with the town administrator, the interim town administrator, and kind of get that person up to speed. You know, whether it's me or somebody else, they need to get up to speed on what's going on. And they got to hear it from the board. So I think there'd be a constant back and forth with the board. One of the things I always did in Kingston, I kept my board informed of everything, especially issues that came up. I didn't want them to hear that out there, you know, and get blindsided. So I always gave them that information, even though sometimes, you know, it may be something that you may not want to give them, but they got to know, you know. So I think it's very important and critical that the board works with the town administrator.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
And can I just say something?
Sure.
I don't want to sound like these are stock answers, you know, because sometimes when you're saying them, I'm thinking to myself, oh, that sounds so corny, you know. But it's true. You know, what I'm saying is from my experience and from my heart of how I would do it. So I'm not like throwing out stock answers.
No?
But I'll tell you where I'll be in 5 years. No.
we appreciate that. Ms. Ewens.
Thank you. What was the professional accomplishment that you're most proud of, and the one that you most regret?
Ooh. Okay, let's start with regret. Then we'll go positive. So regret, professional regret. Probably years ago I ran for state rep. I took out papers for my district in Norfolk County, and got all the signatures, got my group online, and they were helping me, and they were all excited and all that. And then we had a medical issue in the family, my wife. And so I had to weigh moving forward or backing off, and I backed off. And I never did it again, because then I got involved in my law practice, and then I got involved in town government, and it's something I always thought, geez, you know, I think I'd be a great rep or a state senator or president, but that's probably my biggest regret, not following through that after that, like going back to that and starting again. That's number one. The other was accomplishment.
I'm sorry?
The other was an accomplishment,
Yes,
right?
thank
Yep.
you.
The accomplishment, well, it's got to be really in professionally. Excelling in law is one thing. I've always put my heart and soul into everything I've done, and in law I've done that. I got a good reputation in the courts, and I got a good reputation in the communities. But with municipal government, I think the biggest accomplishment was going to Kingston. And Kingston at the time had gone through 5 or 6 town administrators in a 5-year period, with a 1 or 2 interim in there too. And it was like a revolving door. And then I came on board, and I thought, wow, you know, there's some real issues here. So I worked on those issues. Some of them were morale issues with employees, budgeting issues. There was issues with facilities. There were facilities that were falling apart. So I came in and I took control of all that and worked to fix these things. And that was, I think, my biggest accomplishment, is getting to a point where I'll tell you a real quick story. When I got there, Christmas parties, they had a first floor Christmas party and a second floor Christmas party. Why? Because the first floor people didn't want to talk to the second floor people in the town hall. So I said, well, it brought everybody in. That stops now. We're going to have one Christmas party downstairs in the lobby. We'll close town hall. And we had the greatest time, and everybody started talking and realizing they're not enemies. They work together. So that changed. That started to change the whole morale of town hall and outside of town hall too, and the highway department, all of them. So I think doing that was one of my biggest accomplishments in Kingston. I have others in education. I teach at UMass Law School, which was a very difficult position to get in the first state law school. And I've been teaching there since it incorporated. Before that, I taught the Southern New England School of Law, taught municipal law, which is great because I learned a lot and I teach a lot. I taught employment law. So I worked with issues in the law school, teaching issues on discrimination, on labor unions and so forth. And I also taught animal law, which is just kind of a fun law, animal rights law. So I think I have accomplishments in each area of my professional career. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on Carver's public safety departments, including our EMS department?
I don't know much about them. I know from working with my own town and also in Kingston, I had a very good relationship with the chiefs, all chiefs, and I think that's something I think I will day one come in and learn about. If I had more time between when I got the call to this interview, I probably would have made some calls or found out more about it. But I'm assuming it's a great police department and fire department and EMS.
They all are, and the reason I bring it up is because we have sort of a unique setup where we have a call fire department and a separate EMS department. So,
okay, yeah, I knew you had a call fire department. Yep. Yeah, and it's we started in Plainville, obviously, these small towns. We had a call fire department, and we moved to over the years probably in the 70s to the 80s to a full-time fire department. But we kept the call fire department too. So they supplement fire department. It's great because when somebody's out sick, they call in one of the call firefighters to fill in, and it works great. It gives us more coverage with less people. We pay our call fire department too. Do you pay a stipend? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that helps.
And another question from Mr. Belbin. How do you handle human resource issues and discipline of employees?
Okay, that's so human resources, that's a critical area of government, obviously, and of administration. How do I handle discipline I'm very forthright. If there's something that they did or they should have done or they didn't do, they're coming in to see me, and they're going to know it. If it takes, obviously the contract may state how they're disciplined. First time maybe a warning, second time a short suspension and so forth. And I'd obviously go by the contract. You have to go by the contract. But I take it right to the source, and one of the things I like to do is allow them to speak, to give their side of it before I judge them on something that I may only hear one side, maybe another employee's side or the board side or somebody. I want to hear what they say, and maybe that's my legal background too, where you start weighing things and you get all information that you can get before you make a decision. So that's how I would discipline. How do I manage? I manage employees with positivity. I don't believe, again, in beating them over the head with a club. I think you can change people more. You get more with honey than you do vinegar at times. Sometimes they need to be beaten over the head when it's something that continues, and you finally get to that point where you say, this has got to stop. But, I work with all aspects of employees, whether they're the custodians or they're the department heads or the finance director. I mean, they're all the same to me. And I take everybody's opinion that wants to give me an opinion, and I weigh that. So that's how I handle it very positively. And it has always panned out for me with the staff that I've had. They're always the ones that hate to see me leave.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
What in your past work experience makes you feel you'd be the best candidate for this position?
Okay, that's easy. That's easy. Okay, so I have the experience of like 3 different areas. I have municipal government experience. I'm sure everybody that's come in here had some kind of municipal government experience. I have law experience. I've saved the town of Kingston, I've saved the town of Plainville a ton of money by dealing with issues before they become issues, especially in terms of employment and employees and legal doctrines that need to be adhered to. I have that. I have a background of education. I have a bachelor's degree from Northeastern. Oh, wouldn't this not? I still don't know how to silence this thing. My wife gave it to me. I don't know. So I have a background from Northeastern University. I have a bachelor's. I have a master's degree from Boston University. And I have a law degree at JD, Juris Doctorate from, which UMass now is UMass Law School, but it was Southern New England then. So I put all those 3 things together along with my great personality and my ability to be on the same level with people, no matter who they are. I put all that together, and I think that gives me a heads up over probably every other candidate that's come in here before me. I don't know. And I've been in your position where to hire a interim town administrator in Plainville, and I know sometimes it's like a crapshoot. You're hearing everybody's best spiel, and then you got to pick one. And then sometimes you're surprised when you get them that it doesn't pan out. So I think you have a known quality in me from my background, from all that background, and now meeting me, I think you get a good sense of who I am. So I think I am the best one to come in here and take charge under your tutelage.
Thank you. Ms. Ewens.
Yes, thank you. How are you going to foster professionalism, employee satisfaction, and initiative among department heads and other employees?
Okay, so we'll start with professionalism. If there's different programs that I can put them in to get more information or more education on whatever they're involved in, if it's highway, getting them certified and so forth, I think that goes a long way to making them feel they're wanted and they're valued, is if you put them in these programs. Let them go to some of the conferences. I know sometimes that costs money, but I think the dividends pay off in that, not only for the department heads, but also for some of the employees. And it gets out there that, that they're valued. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is showing them that they're valued. And what was the second part of that?
Employee satisfaction and initiative.
Initiative goes along with that. I think one of the things I started in Kingston is that I had meetings, not only department head meetings, but I would have staff meetings. Close the town hall for an hour, bring the whole staff in. So again, they're valued. They feel like they're equal to the department heads, who usually always get looked at as like running the town. But it's everybody. It's every employee that needs to feel that. So I think that's how I would start to get them on board and then see what their goals are. If their goals are to move up, and there's potentially positions that they can move up, and then to direct them in that direction, so they're not stifled in one spot for 20 years. But that's how I would do it, and that's how I did it. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Bogart?
What does rural character mean to you, and what could you do in your role to help preserve Carver's rural character?
Rural character is very important to me. I live in a section of Plainville that's all horse farms, very rural in the area that I live in. And Plainville still is somewhat rural town. Became a little more commercialized with the casino that went in, and some of the shopping centers. But I think it's important. Rural character is something that's built into a town and built into the townsfolk, that they feel that, they want that, they want to keep that. Sometimes towns move faster than they should in terms of changes, and they lose that rural character. And I'm sure, like Plainville 20 years ago, Carver is that town that likes, the townspeople like to have that rural feel, not being built up with mega apartment complexes and other buildings that are more than 2 stories high, because that kind of changes the look and feel of a town. So I think it's very important to hold that as long as you can, but to do some expansion responsibly, so that it doesn't take away from that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
What is your expectation and availability of hours of employment, and when can you start?
So I've been I work with another attorney too, and I've been kind of ratcheting down my practice. I only have really 2 current cases that need to be completed, and one is set in August, believe it or not, because of the courts are so backed up. So I have nothing on that one. This one, the other one, is a contractual matter, should wrap up within the next 2 weeks, a week or so. But that doesn't take much time. I can do that on my own time. When could I start? I could start tomorrow. I can work 40 hours, 35 hours, and I've never looked at my hours as I'm only working 35 hours and I'm going home. If something needs to get done, if there's a meeting that I need to attend, I'd attend that. It's not, 35 hours and I'm out of here. That's how I've always been. I mean, and when you have your own business as a lawyer, some days I was in the office at 1 a.m. doing discovery stuff, and so you learn that you got to do what has to get done. So that you don't have to worry about.
This is not the type of job that tends to lend itself to an 8 to 5.
That's right. That's right. Most meetings are in the evening, because that's when board members are not working and they can come in and have meetings. So
that's right. Is there anything you'd like to tell us? Anything else you'd like the board to know?
I think I've said enough. No, just that I would love the opportunity to come in here and come to Carver and be part of what will be the fabric of Carver, at least in an interim basis. And who knows? Maybe, I don't know, how long do you anticipate the interim portion?
I think approximately 6 months.
6 months.
That's
and
about.
Who knows, in 6 months, you may say, see ya, thank you, we appreciate it. But you may say, we want to keep you longer. You're a good guy, you know what you're doing, and the staff and the boards love you, and you're going to stay. And we can work that out.
So you're aware, we have set up a screening committee to interview folks for the permanent job. So if that was something you wanted to pursue, you found out you wanted to pursue that, you'd have to apply to the screening committee.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not thinking that. But you don't know,
Right.
But anyway, that's me in a nutshell.
Is there anything else from the board?
Yes, thank you. You mentioned earlier, in response to one of Mr. Townsend's questions, that one of the major challenges and opportunities that that we need to still maintain our town, but maybe get more of an industrial base, maybe shift the tax base away from the residents. I don't know whether you're aware that our big industrial base here is agriculture. We are an agricultural community.
Yep.
And we have shifted the tax rate away from the residents.
Oh, you did, okay, that's good.
Just recently. We've
Yeah.
been doing that for a while.
We did that in Plainville, too.
And our call firefighter department is extremely important to us because they save us a huge amount of money. Our EMS is self-sufficient.
Oh, excellent.
So, and it's very unusual to be
Yeah,
like
it
that,
is.
as
It
Mr.
really is.
Townsend pointed out.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know how much you knew about that and whether your understanding of Carver included the knowledge that this call fire department sometimes also is made of members who work for the town, or sometimes also cranberry growers. Not to just harp on the fire department, but the cranberry industry is not doing very well. And so I guess one of what I'm getting at is, given this information, and I know you're just applying for the interim, but what, if anything, would you do to preserve what we have? Or is there some big change that you think we ought to do?
So second question for us, is there some big change? I don't think so. I think the only thing I would look at, probably suggest, is that if there were areas where near any of the highways that would lend itself to having, say, like a big box store somewhere.
We don't have big box in our zoning.
No, you don't, okay. Zonings can change, as you know. But, you know, because that brings in money and it doesn't change.
Well, big box has been shown to be actually slightly tax negative, but I don't
Yeah,
want to get into it right now.
because we have one in Plainville, and it's been positive. So obviously, it brings with it trucking and other things, but so I don't know. I'd have to get a real feel of what is going on in Carver and what can be done and can't be done. And obviously, an interim doesn't change things like that, you know? It's,
A lot can happen
but
in
can
6
do.
months.
True. But it'd be something that, you know, if the board wanted me to research something, I would do the research on it and get it to the board, so the board can make a informed decision. I mean, with my suggestion, I guess, so.
So the first part of the question was, would there be something you would do to maintain what we've got?
Well, I think that you would just continue to keep the industry going, the cranberry industry, if that's a major industry, and somehow talk to state reps and state senators and see if there's a need for them to be somehow subsidized by the government to keep them working. I know they've done that in other areas of business in the past, so I don't see why it couldn't happen with the cranberry growers. Kingston, too, is a big cranberry town, and a waterfront town, too. And that was a big part of their livelihood, too, was these cranberry bogs. Probably not as big as Carver, but...
It's important to the whole area. It's important to our whole area.
The whole area is, I know, Plimpton and, yep. All ocean, right?
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. Mr. Fennessy, thank you very much. Thank you for accommodating our updated schedule today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the call coming in. Again, good luck, no matter who you choose, and, good luck with it.
So you know, we will be making a decision relatively shortly. You will hear from us, one way or the other, and we will move forward.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
very
Nice
much.
meeting you. Nice meeting you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Thank you. I shake your hands, but my wife's a nurse, and she says, don't shake the hands. You're not bringing that home. Okay, thank you.
All right. So With that being said, just a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Area 58 for accommodating our schedule today. I know we've had a lot of brief interruptions, so I appreciate that. And I think we all need to thank Elaine just for putting this whole thing together. This is, she spent quite a bit of time scheduling this, rescheduling it on the fly today. So thank you very much, Elaine, for working on this whole thing for us. We appreciate it. With that, I will just say that we have another meeting tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, and where we will discuss possibly, selecting a candidate. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.